Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mormonish. I'm Rebecca,
And I'm Landon.
and we are back again with another kind of midnight podcast, aren't we, Landon?
They're all at midnight, it seems.
They're all at midnight. What's wrong with us? Why do we have day jobs?
Well, that's why we have to do this at midnight.
I get it. I get it. This is one that we have been trying to do for a couple months. Oh my gosh, we've
Mhm.
been doing the research, we've been talking to people, we've been trying to put it together. Other things have come up, mostly Fairview, right, which is more time
Yep.
sensitive. But this is a podcast that is directly related to that scenario there. And in fact, every other temple building scenario that we follow, isn't it, Landon?
It's very closely follows it, but it's from a different angle. We're going to look at this from a different view. Uh, how does we've watched Fairview, we've seen everything going back and forth, we've seen all the different meetings that we saw at Heber, that we saw. We didn't so much watch the Cody ones, but we watched the Heber ones, we watched the Lone Peak, we've watched Fairview now, and in all these cases we always hear from the members, oh, this is just anti-religious bigotry that
Right.
is happening in our
Persecution.
community, persecutions, we're
Yeah.
being persecuted. So we thought, well, let's look at how a town meeting goes in a predominantly LDS uh, town, a predominantly LDS uh, city council,
Mhm.
and let's see how well they welcome the church at their city meeting. So we thought we'd take a look at it from that direction.
Exactly. What happens when the church wants to build a building in a town like Landon described, where there are a lot of LDS people and they have differing opinions? So this is going to be fascinating. All right, let's go to our first slide and tell everybody what we're talking about.
Okay.
All right. So we are actually going to be talking about the lovely town of Nauvoo. Have you been there
Nauvoo,
before?
the Nauvoo.
The Nauvoo. I'm telling you, it doesn't get more Mormon or origin story-y as Nauvoo. We're going to be talking about something happening in Nauvoo. Seriously. Have you been to Nauvoo before, Landon?
I
I
have
have
been to
not.
Nauvoo. I
You
have.
have.
Yep.
I have
Yep.
not. Okay. And what, a while ago or more recently?
No, it was 10, 12 years ago probably. But
Okay.
yeah, Nauvoo is in the Midwest. It's in Illinois, right along the Mississippi River. That's the Mississippi River that you see there. When I No, I must have been there even longer ago because the temple I don't think was there when I went there. So uh, yeah, it's been probably 20 years since I've been there.
Yeah.
But it's a very quaint, very small town. And if for those who do not know what Nauvoo is, when the Saints left Missouri, fleeing the persecution that they claim, which they also were giving as much persecution as they were
It's a
receiving.
two-way street.
It was a two-way street. They left and they moved into Illinois State and formed a city called Nauvoo.
Yep.
And with that, they've got what was called the Nauvoo Charter. They got a charter from the Illinois state government, which is probably the equivalent of RLUIPA today. It gave them all the rights that they could do anything in the city that they wanted, that they had complete control. And so a lot of times people would come into Nauvoo with arrest warrants for Joseph Smith or whatever, and the council would overrule that and wouldn't give up Joseph Smith with the arrest warrants. And so this got to be quite uh, a sore spot with the neighboring communities, that Nauvoo had all of this political power. But in the end, it was the burning of the press there
Mhm.
by Joseph Smith when William Law printed the Nauvoo Expositor, that caused him to go to jail, which is where he was killed at the jail in Carthage, not far away. So Nauvoo has a great history, and at that time, the Saints left Nauvoo and left and went to Salt Lake City after Joseph Smith was killed. And they left their temple behind, which was later destroyed. It was burned down, lightning hit it, arsonists,
All kinds of things.
all kinds of things happened. So the town was left for hundreds of years
Yep.
to grow on its own.
Yeah.
And then once the church got prosperous, they decided it was time to move back in and restore it and make a historical site. And they basically moved back in and bought up the whole town.
Yeah.
So 40% of Nauvoo is owned by the LDS Church.
Yeah, it's
Um,
crazy. We have a whole bunch of stats on some slides
yep.
coming up about all this. It's just crazy. But this picture right here is a picture of the, of course, refurbished and rebuilt a century later Nauvoo Temple. And you can see, like Landon said, the Mississippi River. And then you can see there's this gorgeous grassy area, what would be to the right of the temple in front of it, that beautiful grassy knoll that, as we understand it, has been utilized by townspeople for picnics and parties. And it's just kind of a beloved area in the town where everybody gathers kind of on the hill by the temple. So
not only by the temple, it's also right in front of the Catholic Church that's there on the right. So it
that's
was
right.
by kind of by all faiths there.
Yeah, you're right. You can see the steeple of the Catholic Church right there to the extreme right of the temple. So you're right. It's kind of like a church row, right? All denominations and everyone comes together. So if we go to the next slide, we'll kind of show you what is happening. And we kind of got wind of this story last fall. We reached out to a couple people in the area, didn't hear anything back. And so we just kind of watched it unfold. We didn't really have anything to do with it at all. But then we're contacted after the fact to kind of say, you know, you might want to go over some of these details because this is a really fascinating story that really needs to be told. So what we're talking about is the new historic Nauvoo Visitor Center.
Wait a minute.
Wants, yes.
When I was there was a visitor center.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that. This is the new historic Nauvoo.
Okay, so this is visitor center number 2.
Exactly. And this is a rendering of that visitor center. Remember the slide we just saw with the beautiful grassy green area between the temple and the Catholic Church? Now this is a sketch of what they want to put there. And this is a visitor center right there. You can see it right between the temple and the Catholic Church on that grassy area. And one of the key features of this visitor center is, they keep talking about it, this gorgeous Tiffany stained glass window with a beautiful rendering of Jesus in it. So this is going to be,
and I don't think they ever mention this stained glass window without saying that it's from Tiffany's.
No, they have to say it's from Tiffany's every single time. So, because Jesus apparently shopped at Tiffany's. I didn't know that. That's right. So this is what the church, the LDS Church, last fall said that they were going to build here in Nauvoo. So let's continue with this story. It's very interesting. So Landon's right. And you've been there before. There is an existing visitor center, and it will remain. There will be 2 visitor centers in Nauvoo. And I think that's one of the things the residents are kind of like, well, you already have a visitor center there. Why do you need this one? So 2 visitor center. Okay. So the new proposed new Nauvoo Visitor Center. Do you want to read through the stats on that, Landon, as we look at the picture here?
The proposal's for a 24,000 square foot building and a parking lot with 120 spaces.
Okay, so that's a fairly sizable building, and you can see there that it would take up pretty much all that space in that grassy area between the Catholic Church and the temple, and parking. And I mean, Nauvoo is kind of a hot spot certain times of year, right? So I can see why they think they need 120 parking spaces to go in front of it.
This is in the summertime, and when they have the festival, lots of LDS people come in tour buses and whatnot. So 120 spaces is actually, there's probably a lot more people than you would expect for 120 spaces, because a lot of youth groups go there on tour buses. So, you know, they take 1-2 spaces and you get, 40, 50 people.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later on, the size of these groups. Some of my own children have gone on these tours where you put them on a bus. It's like a heritage tour, and they drive you all over the church history sites. And Nauvoo is, of course, the crowning jewel of everything. And in the summer, there is a giant pageant that's there. So I think it's like the only pageant that's left, right, Landon? They did away with pretty much every other pageant.
I think the Hill Cumorah one just ended, right? There's no more Hill Cumorah.
Yeah, no more Hill Cumorah.
I think that's called the City of Joseph or something like that. The
City of Joseph, something like that. Okay, so do you want to read this, Landon? This is from an article in November of 2023. This is kind of when we first became aware of something was happening in Nauvoo. They're building something in Nauvoo.
Yeah, this is from an article by Peggy Fletcher Stack. It says in March 2023, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City arrived in Nauvoo to announce plans for what they said was a historic visitor center, which would sit next to the faith's rebuilt and rededicated temple. Many Latter-day Saints embraced the proposal, while critics, including fellow believers, raised objections, urging the Utah-based church to move the structure off the green and down the hill a few hundred feet. Some 105 opponents, of whom 16% self-identified as Latter-day Saints, 41% as Catholics, and the rest cited no religious affiliation, signed a petition. Meanwhile, 23 proponents of the plan, all identified as Latter-day Saints, signed a second petition. Both were submitted to City Hall. It appears that few, if any, Nauvoo publicly oppose the construction of a visitor center. It is all about location, location, location.
Does this sound familiar?
Yeah, in this case, look, you've got 105 people opposing it, only 23 that support it, and all 23 are Latter-day Saints. Whereas, if 16% are Latter-day Saints, that's of 105, what's that, 17? So 17 of the 105 are LDS, and 23 of the proponents, but then all the rest of the people oppose the visitor center. And again, they don't oppose the visitor center being built. They're opposing the location of where the visitor center is being built. And we'll say why here in a little bit.
Yep, it's always about the location. You can see some close-ups in that last shot of the visitor center. So Landon kind of went into this a little bit, but I'll read this really quickly from the Salt Lake Tribune article. A little background of Nauvoo. Building on the sacred space took place in the 1840s during Mormonism's early years. It was the apex of the Latter-day Saints' efforts to transform a swamp-infested riverbank into a religious utopia. These ardent believers continued to work on their limestone treasure, the temple, even after founder Joseph Smith was gunned down in 1844. But as antagonism with their neighbors escalated, more than 12,000 heartbroken Latter-day Saints abandoned the temple and trekked west with Brigham Young. There it sat, the temple, attacked by ruffians, burned at the hands of arsonists until a tornado finished the job. In May of 1850, the grassy hill was vacant for more than a century. What a legacy. What a history.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can see the temple there in the picture. I mean, this is a picture from old Nauvoo.
Yeah, most people don't know, but Nauvoo was the largest city in Illinois, I believe at the time, even larger than Chicago.
Yeah, and it had kind of a reputation, didn't it?
It did. It had a reputation for several things. It was known as a counterfeiting capital because rumor has it that the Latter-day Saints were making counterfeit coins and whatnot. And that's one of the reasons they had to leave after Joseph Smith was gunned down, was because the federal marshals were coming with a warrant for many of the leaders of the church at the time for counterfeiting. So, but it was a safe haven and known as a safe haven for the Latter-day Saints, where people from outside could not come in, really, because it was pretty much controlled by the LDS. And it is once again that way here.
Yeah,
in
well, and it's, I think, an example of a theocracy, right? There it was, very contained. Yet there were some activities going on there that the church upper leaders were involved in that made it kind of, people knew, don't go trade in Nauvoo. Don't go watch your money in Nauvoo. It was that kind of a vibe, I think.
There's a whole book on it called The Kingdom of Nauvoo, because it was basically run as a theocracy. The church had complete control of the town.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, and it's funny because I never gave much thought to Nauvoo. Honestly, I never thought, are there residents that live there? Who lives there now? Isn't that funny? I just never did, because I've never visited. I just always think of it as old Nauvoo. I've never really thought it into the 21st century. So,
and for those who don't know, the Brighamites left, but Joseph's wife Emma remained there. Other saints remain there. Other children. Groups, other LDS groups or Mormon groups stayed there, and then they started branching off and making different groups as well. So not all of the Mormons left Nauvoo, just the ones that followed Brigham Young.
Isn't that funny? And those of us who are Brighamite Mormons, we don't we never gave it that any thought either, that a lot of people remained behind. The RLDS church, began with Joseph's son. So there's a lot of history there that I think Brighamite Mormons are not aware of at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, as we said, the temple was actually burned down, and
A tornado.
a tornado hit it. Yeah, there was a lot of things that happened to it, and it just became run down and became a pile of rubble over the years. So on April 4th, 1999, President Gordon B. Hinckley surprised the viewers at General Conference by announcing his plans to rebuild the Nauvoo, Illinois temple.
It was a big moment. I remember this.
Yeah, this was a big moment in conference. So let's listen to that.
In closing now, I feel impressed to announce that among all of the temples we are constructing, we plan to rebuild the Nauvoo temple. A member of the church and his family have provided a very substantial contribution to make this possible. We are grateful to them. It will be a while before it happens, but the architects have begun their work. This temple will not be busy much of the time. It will be somewhat isolated, but during the summer months, we anticipate it will be very busy, and the new building will stand as a memorial to those who built the first such structure there on the banks of the Mississippi.
So there it is. I think people were stunned. People were excited. It's almost like a fulfillment of prophecy that the temple again would be built in Nauvoo. Is that how you took it back in the day?
Yeah, it was an exciting time. You didn't think about, of course, we're going to go build a temple, but you don't think about all of the politics involved with building a temple in a small community of approximately 1,000 people.
That's exactly right. So we're going to go over, as a preface to talking about the visitor center, exactly what happened when they rebuilt the temple. And we have kind of a statement from a former mayor, right? And somebody that's been involved in city government for multiple years and was still involved in city government at the time of the visitor center. But this is kind of a description from our friend John, who wants to kind of talk about what it was like 2 decades ago when they built the temple. And then he'll also be talking later on about what it's like with the visitor center. So this is a couple pages. Do you want to read this? John's words here.
Yeah, he says, I know many others have stressed their reasons for objecting to the location of the proposed new temple visitor center, but I want to go beyond that and express my thoughts on other projects I was part of in my 20 plus years of city government. My first interaction with the Suits from Salt Lake was early in my role as a city council member. My reference to Suits was because before that, my interaction with members of the LDS faith were personal. Attending grade school with several members showed me they were just one of us kids from Nauvoo. So the shock I encountered when I witnessed this separate group opened my eyes. Always coming off as wanting to be good neighbors, they showed their real mission when you had doubts about new projects, and when pushed hard enough, the condescending, almost threatening side came forward.
Now that doesn't sound familiar at all, does it?
No. This is the same reaction we're getting by non-members in every single one of these cities that the church is announcing these temples in residential areas and coming in and saying, move over, we're putting our temple here, we don't care what you say, and they're just moving in. He's saying that we were all good neighbors, we were all good friends, and all of a sudden they want to build this temple. We say, I don't like this idea, and all of a sudden we're just bombarded and bombasted, and it's like we're their worst enemy because we've said we don't want something built where they're saying that it needs to go. There's no dialogue. There's just seems to be this venom that comes out if you at all oppose that.
Yeah, it's almost like true colors show is kind of what that alluded to me. Friends and neighbors for years, and then a project like this and true colors show. Although again, I still say it's not the people, it's the institution, and they're just very much trained to do what the institution is telling them to do.
And that's what I think he's saying by the Suits. The corporate church has come in and said,
Right.
this is what we're doing. And all of a sudden, everyone who was my friend and neighbors go rushing to the suits and do whatever the suits say and ignore the good neighbor vibe that they had.
Yep, that's it. So let's see what John has to say. As he said, 20 years in city government here. So, and you can jump in anytime, Landon, because I know we've had a conversation with John about some of the money and things. So you can jump in here. When President Hinckley announced the rebuilding of the Nauvoo temple, remember we just saw that clip, we were quickly approached by church officials hitting us with so much at once that we were nervous that even though the comment by President Hinckley to our mayor at the time that we should not worry, there will be no problems, we knew this was just the start. Negotiations on the new temple started with a promise of an impact fee. And I think that's something that a builder will pay to a city basically for the impact they're going to have. Is that right?
Yeah, and in this case, it's really quite bad because you're talking about a town of 1,000 people. It's a very small town. They don't have much of a tax base, and of that, 40% of the land is owned by the LDS church. Not to mention, you've got 3 or 4 other churches and a church school,
and they pay no taxes.
All non-profits that don't pay any property tax. So you've got 1,000 people paying the taxes for all 40 to 50% of the land that is non-taxable. So they're covering all the costs. So you can imagine when you're a small town mayor and all of a sudden you're told, we're going to build this huge temple and then we're going to bring all these tourists into town to go see this temple. You can imagine what you're thinking. You're going, oh my gosh, we don't even have enough money to build a road. How are we going to do this? And so the church said, okay, we're going to pay an impact fee because we know that your town doesn't have any money to even oversee, to even have a building inspector to inspect the building at this point.
I know, it's funny. So John says, well, we were not able to legally impose an impact fee. So the church made us an offer of $107,000. That sounds low. I don't know much about it, but it sounds not very high. He says, we had no idea what a good number was. So we investigated other towns that new temples had been built, and we learned quite a bit, mainly that 107,000 was pretty light, just like we thought. When I mentioned to the church officials that another town charged them utility hookup fees almost double to our offer, they immediately said, well, then double our offer. This startled me, thinking that if this was so important, then why offer a small amount up front? Lowballing. Is that what that's called? Lowballing?
Lowballing, yeah.
Was it because we were this little podunk town with no zoning, barely any codes, so we didn't know any different? Then my question to them was, what happens if at the council meeting that evening, the council doesn't approve the project? What happens next? Because that's legitimate. The council has the right to vote. What happens?
Yeah. So they say, okay, 107K. They say that sounds light. They say, well, take it to 214,000. And they say, okay, well, let us think on this. But what happens if, at the council meeting next week, we don't approve it? And here's the church's response. They quickly answered, we will return next spring, pay the $19,000 building permit, which at the time was all we could ask for, and build the temple, and the city gets nothing else. This really sounded like a wanting to be a good neighbor response. There was price on our town only if we agreed. We went to work and came up with a number right at $500, and that should be $550,000.
Yeah, not $5 million.
Yeah, that included a city planner for 3 years. They came back with $495,000 plus a church supplied city planner.
No.
Their reasoning was they had never paid over $500,000 before and didn't want to set a precedent. This was my first introduction to the levels of church status. Locals were not even part of the thoughts and concerns on what this would do to our little town. After 2 years of being on the council and 16 years as mayor, I was part of several meetings where after it was all said and done, their decisions were already made prior to those meetings, and basically we were involved just as a courtesy.
That really sounds familiar. And this was 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And to say, it sounds like, oh, the church is going to pay 550,000. They don't have to do that. And that's true. They didn't have to do that. However, the church owns 40% of the land
Yeah,
in
already.
the city. And this has to be built. The city has to oversee it. The city has to make sure that that the building is tying into their utilities, that everything is set. And they don't have full-time employees to do this. So they ask for a city planner. We need money to hire a city planner. The church says, well, we'll give you a city planner for 3 years, but it's our city planner. He works for us.
Yeah.
We'll let him work for you. What do you think that city planner is going to do? Do you think he's watching out for the city, or is the city planner watching out for the church? So the church puts an insider in there so that there should be no problems getting the temple built, because the city planner is their guy.
An
Very
inside
similar
guy.
to
Yeah,
what we
that's the
saw
playbook.
in Cody.
Cody. Yep. That's part of the playbook, to have an inside guy. And I think in Bakersfield, because the city manager is LDS.
Yep,
So
yep.
anyway, so the temple was built, and there it is. And I think it's a beautiful building. Honestly, I think it's
It
very
is.
nice. I think it fits in. I think it has a gorgeous steeple, and I think it's pretty. I'd actually like to go visit. I haven't ever seen it. So
Yep. We definitely
very
need
pretty.
to take a more up-to-date tour.
That's right. A more up-to-date tour. So Hinckley himself dedicated it on June 27th, 2002, the 158th anniversary of Smith's death. Interesting. And Hinckley promised, according to a report in the local newspaper, the Hancock County Journal Pilot, that no other structure would ever be built on that hill to obstruct the view from the temple. So thus it remained an open field available to everyone in the community. And this becomes a point as we talk about the visitor center. Now, it was reported in this newspaper. I haven't found this article yet, but I'm going to find it. I'm looking. And we also talked to, was it three separate people that heard those words, right?
Mm-hmm.
That heard the words, that were involved in city government or church communications, and heard him say those words. So this will become a point later where the church tries to kind of waffle on that, or maybe just enact the new edict, much like classic cars, or unlike classic cars and vintage comic books.
Yeah.
The words of a former prophet do not age well. So throw them out as soon as the person passes away. That's got to be scary for any current leaders, right? Everything they're saying right now is
they can renege on as soon as that guy's dead. It seems
he didn't know what he was talking about. Out the window.
So because President Hinckley told him, hey, this beautiful view, we will preserve this beautiful view from here of the river. No other structures will be built here.
Yep, it was just be able to see the river. They said you could always see it. So another important point to notice here is, and you can probably talk about this, Landon, is the zoning codes right there in 2002 around the temple.
Yeah, so keep in mind the church, President Hinckley promised that this area would remain undeveloped so that everyone would have a view from the temple and from this site. But remember that city planner that the church gave them? Well, that city planner said, well, in order to protect this area, we need to zone it the most strict zoning we can. And that zoning is residential.
Yeah.
So let's zone everything, these areas around the temple, as residential zoning.
Right. And wasn't it a rezoning? It was
a rezoning.
Else.
They changed the zoning to residential.
At the behest of the church.
At the behest of the church.
The church said, you need to change this to residential. We won't settle for anything else. This land must be residential. And this comes into play later. It's actually kind of funny. Yes. So now we've given a little bit of background, and we will go back to the proposed Nauvoo Visitor Center story. So here again is another view of the temple. You can see it on the left-hand side, and you can see the Catholic church that is over there with its beautiful steeple. And then you can see a rendering right in front of the Catholic church of the proposed visitor center. And on the right, you can see a closer up rendering. And of course, the river then would be down left of the, did I say right? Down. Maybe I meant left. Yeah. So it definitely would kind of obstruct the view of the river. And it definitely would take up space on that beautiful land that everyone's using, the community is using.
Yeah, that's the hill. The temple sits at the top of a hill. So it goes down where you're seeing in front of it. And you can see they're kind of flattening that out to build the visitor center and the parking spaces on there.
Yep. So, all right. So how does Nauvoo feel about this proposed visitor center? And these are all from articles in the Tribune and a few other papers. So why don't you read this one, Landon?
A proposed new visitor center has caused a bit of tension in the last 6 months in a community that is not only a religious center, but a small town that, like most in the region, is dealing with a declining tax base and aging infrastructure. The conflict is not because anyone in town is opposed to a new visitor center, but because of the proposed location. In March, the LDS Church submitted a site plan request to the city of Nauvoo to build a historic visitor center and parking lot at the northeast corner of Wells and Young Street, which is just down Wells from the temple. The proposal was for a 24,000 square foot building and a parking lot with 120 spaces. Hill said she immediately felt that was the wrong spot for it and launched a petition that garnered 120 signatures in 36 hours, not against the visitor center, but against the proposed site. My whole desire has been to have the LDS Church really examine why they feel it has to be there, and if there possibly could be another spot, Hill said.
Yeah, again, we hear that same kind of thing all the time, don't we?
Absolutely.
Another concern is a busy intersection. It says the location is not only in close proximity to the temple, but also right across the street from St. Peter and Paul's Catholic Church, and you saw that. It's also diagonal from the Catholic elementary school and not far from the LDS meeting house. It's on a street and intersection many residents feel is already congested and unsafe, and even more so during church services, weddings, and funerals. The major concerns are pedestrian and vehicular safety and the integrity of the neighborhood, including noise and light pollution and how it would obstruct a breathtaking view of the Mississippi. The original site plan was set to be denied by the church when it was withdrawn
by the city.
The original site plan was set to be denied by the city when it was withdrawn by the church. So before and we'll talk about this in a minute, the first plan, the first application was taken back so that they could do some retooling, and we'll tell you why. Sims said the church satisfied safety concerns with a revised site plan. We will, at our expense, widen Wells Street, Sims says. That's a benefit to the city at no cost to the city that will allow parking on both sides of the street and still allow two-way traffic, which is currently not possible. Other changes in the church's revised plan includes moving across to the parking lot to the other side of the street and working with the city to make Wells and Young a four-way stop. The new visitor center is expected to draw 150,000 visitors a year, according to the church. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that they said, that we're going to widen the street, we're going to put four-way stops, we're going to put, sidewalks in. That's a benefit to the city. Is it? Does the city need it if you didn't if you weren't building the visitor center, if you hadn't built the temple, would the city need this? So the city needs this only because of the fact that you're building these facilities. If you weren't building these facilities, it wouldn't be needed. So is this really for the city's benefit, or is this for the church's benefit in this area? Yes, the city, it helps with the concerns of the citizens, but let's face it, you're building more parking. Who's going to be parking in all these parking stalls? It's going to be the people coming to the visitor center and the LDS visitors to the town that are going to be benefiting from this.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. So, all right. And here's a picture of the temple and a lot of people walking down beside it. And we're going to show you more pictures of the visitors. It's probably hard to comprehend unless you actually go visit during that peak time of year. And I'm guessing a lot of our viewers and listeners have been there during the summer, right? That's always the hot time to go.
Yeah. So
okay.
It's already crowded with LDS tourists. And this is a picture you can see. They just bring busloads of kids into the town and, let them see the historical sites. Did you want to read that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I can read that. Let's see. The temple is a popular destination for Mormons and other tourists year-round, but never more so than during the 1.5-week City of Joseph pageant, which draws thousands of visitors to Nauvoo in late July and early August and sorely tries the patience of longtime residents. When we visited on the final weekend of the pageant, a steady stream of cars, tour buses, and big rigs headed to the town's grain elevator created a rush hour feel on the normally quiet streets. People think they're at Six Flags or Disneyland and just go walking out on the street, said City Council woman Pam Knowles. We've had people park their car in the middle of the street and go walking away to take pictures. Knowles' father, Al Stevenson, who lives across the river in Fort Madison, Iowa, but spends much of his time in Nauvoo, said that many of the tourists are rude to the locals. We're not against their religion, he said over lunch at Grandpa John's restaurant. I'm not against anyone's religion, but I'm against pushy people.
Yeah, you can imagine a town of 1,000 people when thousands of people, you more than double or triple your population during that time, that's going to cause concerns for the residents.
Yeah.
And they're expecting that you come and behave yourself and be polite when you come into their city. And instead, people just jump out of their car to take pictures, and the buses ignore all the bus routes and whatnot. So
yeah, and I wonder if tourists just don't even realize that it's an actual city and not just like a tourist city where every building is a church site, and they think it is much like a Six Flags where you can just go anywhere. I wonder if they even recognize that it's an actual town, functioning as an actual town. That's probably true. Tour buses and traffic. Oh, read this one, Landon.
John McCarty is a lifelong Nauvoo resident. He attends the Catholic Church and is a former mayor and city council member. He said when the temple was built, city leaders were told bus traffic would be rerouted to lower areas and up the hill. But as we've seen forever, we have that sign right there that says bus route, and those are totally ignored 90% of the time, he said. McCarty said Nauvoo's roads were built for Model A's, not tour buses. Grain trucks also have to get through town in the rural community. He believes putting the visitor center at Wells and Young Streets would drive even more traffic to a side of town that wasn't built for it. Looking at it, and then they said they had some of the numbers for how many people would use it. The red flags go up immediately from living here all these years. If you open one floodgate, it's just going to take over, McCarty said. The former mayor also said the tourism dollars that come into Nauvoo because of the temple and other sites do not make up for what's lost because so much property owned by the church is off the tax rolls. It's estimated 40% of property in Nauvoo is owned by the church or the nonprofit organization set up to restore historic sites.
Yeah, and that's what you were saying. 40% of the property that does not pay property taxes is owned by the church.
Yeah, and then you keep, anyone who has ever worked with LDS people know that the LDS people support LDS businesses. So all these tour buses coming in are going to be going to LDS-owned properties, to
hotels, motels, whatever,
motels,
the lodging,
Airbnbs, all of that, because they want to have a certain standard, that the kids are going to be involved with. And so they're going to support LDS businesses. So the non-LDS businesses in town are not going to be receiving any benefit. And yet they're the ones paying the taxes for all of these LDS sites that don't pay any taxes.
Exactly.
So you can see where that would be set up to be problematic.
Yeah, and I can understand why the residents feel the way they do. Here are some examples of some of and it's teenage, high school youth groups and college, young single adult groups and all kinds of things. They have conferences and events and people come for the festival. It's just seems like it's huge and overwhelming. It really does make me want to go.
Yeah, and who's got to control this? The police have to control the parking, the crowds, so you've got to have a budget to control this number of people in a town that only has 1,000 people. So you can see the problems that this brings. And let's talk a little bit about the local merchants that express their concerns of this.
Yeah, this was a little unfortunate. I came across this Facebook post on a site about Nauvoo, and it says, big shout out to the youth groups that visited on Friday at noon, all 23 of you. I appreciate the ones that actually paid for your items. Unfortunately, I've watched the camera footage 3 different angles and hope the others enjoy the lip gloss, the bracelets you stole. And honestly, who knows what other small items. Also, the one girl that opened a lip gloss, tried it, and then put it back. That was very cool of you. Can't wait to find it. But more importantly, I have to give props to the 2 girls who stole the last 2 of my vacay t-shirts totaling $78. The professionalism of this theft is outstanding. I mean, I was standing on the other side of the counter and couldn't even tell that's what you were doing. But my handy dandy camera sure did. You didn't think I would notice them being gone once you left, huh? I probably shouldn't have so soon after you left if I hadn't have watched you parade it around to all your friends, telling them how badly you needed them. That was the first red flag. I'm honestly impressed how you huddled around each other in support of the one that was stealing, kind of like a well-oiled machine. Gee, it's almost like you've done this before. I'm obviously using sarcasm to contain my fury. This was the first group of many that will be coming through this town this summer, and I'm already down how many items? I can't keep going through inventory when a group leaves to discover how much they got away with. And of course, I know not all groups are the same, but stricter rules will take effect when you open tomorrow, and they will be posted on the door before entry. I'm done with this nonsense. So I can see their frustration. And I know that some shop owners that we heard of did try to put signs up that said only a few can come in at a time and you can't bring a backpack. But then apparently they had some leaders of the youth groups that said that's, not constitutional. You can't do that. Called corporate of these stores and made them take the signs down. So it looks like the shop owners really had no recourse.
And anyone can imagine they're bringing in youth groups, 23 groups, she said. That's a busload, 23 busloads of kids going through her shops. And these kids may have a couple adults, 2 or 3 adults per bus. But we all know how teenage kids behave when they're in groups. And when they get in a store like this, you're going to have problems. And that's exactly what's happened with the local merchants. So here it sounds like youth groups are coming in and actually stealing or at minimum, messing with the merchandise on the shelves and making it so they can't sell it.
Yep, allegedly, I guess we could say. Okay, what does this say, Landon?
This a couple more Facebook's responses. Sadly, it will only get worse. Talking to the bishop and the youth leaders who help coordinate these children will get nothing done. When the new center is built, the numbers will increase tenfold. The kids are free from parental control. Check backpacks at the door. Good luck. Her Dollar General is just as bad and unable to force any preventive rules to stop the shoplifting. Call City Hall and ask the City Council and Mayor to help stop this and protect the local citizens and merchants in Nauvoo. Then they said, I'd request an adult come in with these groups. Probably won't do any good. I'm assuming these kids are there to see all the Mormon stuff. Then someone else said, we tried that at our store and were threatened with a lawsuit for age discrimination. Boy, the LDS just love to sue.
Yeah, very litigious.
Then the person said, I was too. All of us were. But if I get pushback this time on my new rules, I'll close. There's no point of me being open if I can't protect how I see fit.
Oh, that's really sad.
So yeah, this is problematic, and we bring this up because you're going to hear it come up in the city council meeting. I think we hear it come up. It was definitely discussed. We've taken clips, but it was definitely an item of concern from the city council as to, we got to provide law enforcement for all the groups of these kids you're bringing in. The merchants are upset. They're losing stuff. People are stealing stuff out of their store, and how are we supposed to do this while you're paying no property taxes to the government here?
Yep. So we heard about the applications. Now let's talk about them each one. So there were 3 applications altogether, and we're just going to go through them really quickly so you can kind of get a sense of what happened. And in some of the other towns that we follow where they're building temples, you've been through this with us where there are different locations, there are different applications that are submitted. Some are taken back, retooled. So this is the first time that the city council became aware of what exactly they wanted to do. This is the first application for the visitor center.
Yeah, and we see that this is for the Church of Jesus Christ and the project name Historic Nauvoo Visitor Center. Down here is the description of the proposed development. Do you want me to read that?
Yeah, why don't you read that?
Okay. The Historic Nauvoo Visitor Center is a connecting link between Historic Nauvoo and the Nauvoo Temple. This facility will include lobby and support space, theater and classroom gallery, youth center, and exhibit space. There will be an office, break room, and storage. Patrons will come and experience an introductory film, art, and exhibits sharing the importance of temples both in 1840s Nauvoo and present day.
Sounds like a visitor center, right? Sounds like all the different ones he's been to. And it seems to me, scroll up a little bit. Let's see who the person who is submitting this application is. Okay. It is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints right there. Okay.
Yep.
But yeah, do you have any other thoughts about that description? To me, it sounds like exactly what you get at Temple Square. You've got a lobby, you've got a theater, you've got films to describe what's happening. You've got all that. Any other thoughts from you on that?
It's a visitor center. It's what any of us would think of when we think of a visitor center.
Exactly. That was it. And that was back in March 21st of 2023. Well, they put that in front of the church, the city council. Now, this is kind of the funny part. Do you want to talk about this, Landon? To the LDS church's surprise.
Yes. So remember how the LDS church with their LDS city planner recommended that they zone this residential so nobody could build anything on this site. Well, it turns out that after the church submitted this application in March, the city discovered that the Temple Green Zone was zoned residential based on the church's recommendation, which meant that only housing, religious structures, or similar places of worship could be built there. So the town took a look at this and said, this isn't a place of worship, it's a visitor center. It's a place where buses and tours and crowds are going to be gathered to learn about historic Nauvoo. It is not a place of worship. And so they said, we're going to have to deny your application because it is a visitor center. Only the city is allowed to put a visitor center in a residential area. It's not authorized currently under code.
And as we heard the description, exactly, no worshiping. It's theater, it's movies, it's instruction rooms, it's a lobby, it's a break room. It's all of that kind of stuff. Exactly. And I think that the church pulled back its application after it realized that. I think that's the story of the first one. I don't remember if the town actually denied it or the city just kind of pulled it back ahead of time.
Well, I think the city recognized it and told them, this is you're not going to be able to build it here. Yeah. So exactly. So they pulled back the application.
Yep. And so now starts this very strange scenario. And we'll start it off with the question, is a visitor center a place of worship? So I think if you ask anybody on the street, they would say, no, it's a visitor center. It's a place where you learn things about a religion or about, I don't know, a historical site, or we've been to many visitor centers.
Well, it's different kinds. All visitors to the city. So it's not one faith. It's anyone coming into town can go and visit it. So how are you worshiping when it's multiple people coming into the building to see about this town?
Yep, that's right. So from another article, it says, when it came out that this building is going to be built in this location, something in my head clicked. I don't think they can build it there because this is residential. Karen Earing, member of the city council, said. So they're remembering that the church itself said, you got to make this residential. And now they're trying to build something that they think would fit in residential, but it doesn't. Earing said residential zoning is the most restrictive in Nauvoo and allows only for homes, churches, schools, and museums run by the city. Nothing like a visitor center. The rezoning realization opened up more conversations and some differing ideas about the proposed visitor center. There were meetings about this, Earing said. Yes, it should be allowed because it is some sort of ancillary building to the temple, and it shouldn't be allowed because it's not a church. And there are not regular worship services there. So it sounds like they were going back and forth on it a little bit. The original site plan in March described the visitor center as a connecting link between historic Nauvoo and the temple to include a lobby, theater, classroom, and gallery. Exactly what we read right off of the application. So right away, there's debate back and forth about, is a visitor center, does it have anything to do with worshiping? And so the church brings back a second application. And this one, I believe, is in July. And they've kind of reworded things. So in this one, if you look up at the top page, there we go, second application. So the project name is the same. Historic Nauvoo Visitor Center, but this time it's a person's name.
Yeah.
It's not the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It goes down through some other details, and then we get to a more detailed description of the property. It says, description of proposed development, specify proposed use of each structure. It says a one-story visitor center with a bus loading and ADA only parking and offsite parking north of Young Street between Wells and Durfee. So that's kind of a very utilitarian. But then they add this giant document, right? And if you scroll up to the top, so I can see that top line, it says the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, quick facts about the proposed historic visitor center of Nauvoo. And let's see, do we want to read through this at all, Landon? Let's scroll down.
I think you've got some slides that cover what they say in here, because what they do is they go through here, right, and but they tell you how will the center be used.
Yes.
And they say the visitor center is different than ordinary church meeting houses or other church sites. Sunday worship services, youth gatherings, service projects, social gatherings, recreational activities, live performances, and other community events generally take place in meeting houses or other church sites, but not in the visitor center. So
say that again.
Not
in the visitor center. And they definitely, and these are some notes from people on the town council, they definitely say Sunday worship service, if you go back up, Sunday worship service, and that's underlined there, is one of the activities that is not happening in the visitor center, according to the second application from the LDS Church.
Yeah, so they go down and they give a lot of, how will it impact your neighborhood and all of this. And then they throw in, what is this?
Ooh, there it is.
Our good friend Ralupi.
Yep.
There it is, Ralupa. They're throwing it out again. And they throw this threatening letter at the city council saying, well, if you don't let us build it, we're going to sue you. Again, we see this in town after town after town. Not how do we work with you? How do we help to sell this to the town? It's you either build it or we're going to sue you.
And interestingly, because this is a predominantly LDS town and it's historic Nauvoo. It's like one of their founding towns, and yet they still don't have any problems saying Ralupa will let us sue you. Yeah. So that was back in July of 2023.
And isn't that great that they can sue the town, and the town has no tax base because the church owns the whole town, right, half the town, to even put up a lawsuit against the church. So when they throw this lawsuit out, it just infuriates the town council, half of whom are LDS, because right, they've just been threatened that they're going to be sued by the church, who owns 40% of the town, who doesn't pay any taxes, so that they have no tax base to defend themselves. They're caught in this vicious circle.
Exactly, because a visitor center is not a place of worship. Or is it? Interestingly, a few months later in October at General Conference, October 6, 2023, Elder Gary E. Stevenson made a really kind of telling statement in his talk that he gave. Do you want to read that, Landon?
Yeah, he says, our temples and homes are the most sacred of these dedicated spaces. In them, we more easily invite and recognize the Spirit. Other holy places include meeting houses, seminary buildings and institutes, and church history sites and visitor centers. Stand in holy places.
Well, now that's what a unique thing to say. I don't think anybody really caught that when we listened to conference back in 2023, but he kind of slipped it in there. A visitor center is a holy place.
Well, somebody caught it because they bring it up in the church meeting that, oh, our apostle just recently said that this is a sacred space, and we'll show that as well.
Which really made me kind of go down a rabbit hole to say how many things that they need to have said do they mention? And I keep predicting that we're going to see that with the steeple doctrine, right? I keep predicting that they're going to slip that into talks and conferences and things like that, because they need that to be said so they can refer to it, in court, in a council meeting. But in this case, none of us knew anything about the visitor center, the house of worship. And so he just kind of made that statement, which was interesting.
This is the problem Fairview is facing right now, is anything that you bring up, the church simply says, oh, our prophet said that doesn't matter and that's important to us. So now it's beyond question. And in this case, any religious zealot can just claim anything and stay in front of the law and not have to do anything, follow any city ordinances or codes, simply because they keep claiming that it's a important part of their religious worship.
Yep, that's exactly right. So the question is a visitor center a place of worship? And the answer is, it is now. Do you want to read this, Landon?
Yeah, the church revised its plan in July, emphasizing the religious nature of the center as a place of worship and religious instruction. The law is clear. It would be illegal for the city to rule that the Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center is not permitted at that location, Latter-day Saint Area 70 Jeremiah J. Morgan wrote in an open letter, because it is a place of worship. Plus, the 70 added, it is unconstitutional to require the church to forego the right to use its property for religious purposes in this way.
Well, there you go. They can't stop them from using it as a house of worship. It's now a place of worship, and that allows it to be built where they want them to build it, where the church wants to build it. That's kind of the argument.
Yeah, they basically have turned a visitor center into a place of worship at this point.
Yeah.
Which they didn't originally, when they didn't think they needed it. It wasn't a visitor center.
Exactly. But once they found out that the zoning required it to be a house of worship, how quickly did it become a house of worship?
Immediately. Are you going to read that one?
Yeah, I can read that one. So from visitor center to worship center, the original site plan in March described the visitor center as a connecting link between historic Nauvoo and the temple, to include a lobby, theater, classroom, and gallery, like every visitor center we're all used to. The revised site plan submitted in July under residential zoning was more detailed about the religious importance of a visitor center and the church's religious need for it. Because again, they're trying to adhere to the residential code, which allows for religious buildings, but not a visitor center. The church's SIMS said Nauvoo residential zoning ordinances include the language other places of worship, and the church does see this as a place of worship. Now, this visitor center is a place of worship because the primary activities that will be engaged in the building are religious instruction and providing information about the beliefs of our faith and the purposes of the temple, SIMS said. So I don't know if we can remember 6 or 7 slides back where they said, unlike a meeting house, right? Unlike a place of worship. And now they're kind of turning it around and making sure that they make every argument for the fact that it is indeed a place of worship.
And then RLUIPA bullies again. Here comes the RLUIPA. Yet in the revised plan, Latter-day Saint officials suggested that if their demands weren't met, Nauvoo resident Karen Earing wrote in a memo to the council, they could trigger RLUIPA, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000. This was a bridge too far, Earing wrote. A strong-arm bullying tactic meant as an unveiled threat. Now remember, half the members of the city council are LDS, and they're seeing this as a threat. The debate over the proposed location is a civic, not a religious issue, she explained. No religious freedoms are being compromised.
Again, so familiar.
We just see it happen over and over.
Ooh, so at this point, Nauvoo residents, who mostly are LDS, right? I don't know the exact breakdown, but there's quite a few LDS and quite a few on the city council. Nauvoo residents expressed disappointment and frustration. Now, all these years later, the suits are back. And this is John again, pushing a new temple visitor center. In my role as planning commission member, and so at this point, he's no longer the mayor or on the city council like he was decades ago. Now, our friend John is actually on the planning commission.
So he's been on the city council, then he was mayor for 16 years. Now he's volunteering. This is how small the town is.
Yeah.
Now he's on the planning and zoning commission because you have to play all the roles when you're in a small town.
Yep, exactly. Let's see. In my role as the planning commission member, I heard the first proposal. I didn't like the area, but I felt if it met public safety standards, it could work. Then we found out the zoning was residential and we were under the impression the property was commercial. Guess we were still a little podunk in our ways. A second proposal was made after it was determined the zoning was different and proper paperwork hadn't been filed originally, and the new one changed the use of the building to supposedly meet residential zoning rules. They called it a church-like structure to try and circumvent zoning rules. Again, why not just comply and find another location?
And these are the zoning rules they put in place to keep anyone from building anything there.
That's what's ironic. They did not remember that they had insisted on these zoning rules, and now they're having to find a workaround for their own zoning rules that they installed. Is that poetic justice? I don't know. We as a committee and many others in the town have no issues with a new visitor center. They just feel another location would be better. Okay, we've heard that like a broken record for 2 years now for different cities that we work with. The omission in the first two proposals of this being church-like and a place of worship to suddenly appear in round 3 is a miracle in itself, especially when this would give them the ability to use RLUIPA and threaten their good neighbors. In this case, they just keep bringing up the point that they keep saying, we just want to be good neighbors. But we know that. We've heard that in every single town. We've heard usually area reps say this in every single town. We just want to be good neighbors. Well, wanting to be a good neighbor is very different from doing the things that you need to do to be neighborly.
And this is the mayor, the former mayor of Nauvoo for 16 years. He talked to us. He said, I knew President Hinckley.
Mm-hmm.
I had the phone number to call him at any time to discuss things.
Yep.
When the temple was being built.
That's a different day.
Here comes this new center, and he has nobody he can ask any questions to. This is being forced down this town's throat, and he is going, I don't know what's going on here.
Yep. So let's, at one of the meetings in August, former Mayor John, our friend, was asked to give a report from the Planning Commission where they were meeting and talking about the visitor center. And so here he is. He's come into the city council to give his report from the Planning Commission about the visitor center. So let's listen to John.
The final thing was the Planning Committee reviewed the updated request by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints regarding the proposed visitor center to be located on Well Street. After reviewing the new site plan and a lengthy discussion over whether the building fits the requirements for an allowed use in a residential zoned area, the Planning Committee voted to approve the proposal with the Nauvoo City Attorney confirming what constitutes a church, as that was what they used it as a church-like structure. This vote was not unanimous. I was one of those that did not vote in favor of it, but I did recommend to have a lawyer's opinion. I know others are going to talk about this, but I just wanted to give you my reasons for not supporting it. The proposal, in my opinion, has been adjusted and reworded from the first proposal of a visitor center to now a church-like structure that would make it more fitting to be allowed in a residential zoned area. As a Planning Commission member, we are tasked with finding what can be good or a bad fit for an area and also have to determine what is the best for the entire town. And that is why we are to listen to those opinions for and against. I've been involved with city government for over 20 years and have taken part in numerous planning discussions. And I've always tried to listen to other opinions and see the good and the bad and not let my own personal thoughts sway my decision. Years ago, after the temple was started, there were several issues that came up, and many never made sense to me on how they benefited Nauvoo as a town. A church representative, who I considered a friend, explained to me that gentlemen in leather chairs out west decide what needs to be done. Well, I've got a leather seat in my 72 GMC pickup, so leather chairs don't impress me a bit. But what stuck with me from that comment was who decides what we need. I've also heard for years from church representatives that we want to be good neighbors. Usually good neighbors try to work things out and listen to others. They don't try and manipulate words to meet the guidelines, and they definitely don't include a threat to pursue legal action if they don't get their way, like this proposal did. We have not said that the visitor center can't be built We just ask that it can be built elsewhere. We have not said that religious practices can't be performed in the structure. We just ask for it to be in another location. So threatening to use religious land use and institutionalized Persons Act as a way to get what they want is a pretty low blow, especially when you look back over the years and see that the city has gone out of their way to allow all religions to practice freely throughout this town. Even though the safety concerns for pedestrian and vehicular traffic have been addressed and met, the one thing that hasn't been proven to me is how this fits the zoning requirements. And also, at what point do we listen to those who have voiced opinions against the location? We ask for a determination for the attorney to say if this building truly meets the residential requirements. Just going off of a description of what the building will be used for without further research is, in my opinion, failing to do our job. Do we listen to the leather chairs, or we do listen to the ones that we face every day? And at this time, I'd like to offer my official resignation from the Planning Commission and the Economic Development Committee. I have mostly enjoyed all my years of service, but I just can't find the desire anymore to put the time into a position that basically has you banging your head against the wall, and that wall is only getting thicker. All I ask of you tonight is to listen to both sides, do your job, and do what's best for the community.
So I don't know if you all caught that, but John resigned because of just the difficulty in this situation of working with the church yet again, right? I think you probably had PTSD maybe from the first time.
This is 20 years of working with this. And as we talked to him, the frustration showed. And he just said, I could not deal with these people anymore. They would stoop to any tactic it took to get things done. And, you know, he's working with people, you know, stores that come into town, businesses that come into town, you know, grain elevators, different things that need to be built. And those people are dealing with him honestly. Here he is dealing with a church. He had walked with President Hinckley. He had the number to President Hinckley's office, and yet here he is over and over and over again, just having the rug pulled out from under him. And as he said, when he was told, you don't run your city, the people in Salt Lake run your city. That's who makes the decisions as to what happens here.
Yep, the leather chairs. I like that. And I liked how he said, I sit in a leather seat. It's in my pickup. So, but yeah, we had a wonderful conversation with John, and he described just some other things, you know, like, sure, we'll widen the roads to accommodate our tour buses and more traffic, but then they would only widen it in front of the places that they use, right? They were not very civic minded as far as doing things to improve the entire town. It was just in front of your buildings. Is that
well,
kind of
he talked about how they needed a road paved, and the church agreed that they would pave the road. Well, if they paved the road from the church, from like the temple down into where the tourist site is to the LDS sites, but they didn't do the upper part that went to the city offices and the other things. They only did the part where they would be driving, not where everyone else would be driving. And that was the kind of stuff that he just said drove him nuts.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's not being a good neighbor. Like they say over and over in all the towns that they want to be. A good neighbor goes the extra mile to help all neighbors, not just your denomination, but all neighbors, civic minded, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. And so, of course, again, we have a town divided because the newspaper articles that I picked up last fall, definite division there. You have faithful LDS that are for the visitor center, aren't paying attention to some of these other issues. You have faithful LDS that are opposed to the visitor center in that location. And some of them came out pretty vocally and were even in the newspaper articles about it. So it's a really interesting study of a town where you have the church's own members saying, I think you can do better. I don't think this is good for our town. Is that how you kind of saw it?
Yeah, exactly. The people who lived in town are going, this isn't the right place for it. It's better suited over here. That would serve the community better. But Salt Lake doesn't care. They want it where they want it. And the locals they don't listen to the locals. Now, of course, they're going to have support from their local members when they go tell them, this is what we're doing and we need your support. But as we said, in those numbers, only, 19 were on the other side and 23 were on one side. So it sounds like it was pretty well divided amongst the LDS themselves that were residents in the town.
Yeah, there were some strong emotions, and I watched many of the town council meetings. I didn't watch all, we're not going to show all of them, but I watched a lot. There were some strong emotions, some strong sentiments from members of the church and also people who are not members of the church, just saying, this is not fit our town. This is not where we want it. You need to move it so it doesn't block the view of the river, like President Hinckley said, and please don't take away our community gathering spot.
Yep, absolutely. So the church sends in their reinforcements to deal with the situation. And Area 70,
who's also an assistant attorney general. Is that right?
Assistant attorney general for the state of Missouri. Even though this is Illinois, he sure touts that a lot. That he's
that's right. Lets everybody know he's an attorney. And I think we have a picture on the next page or the next slide. Yeah. Okay. The other thing that happened, the town is divided. Townspeople, LDS, write letters to the church, don't they?
Yep.
Yeah. What do they say in this one?
We appeal to you, brethren, that you will reconsider the visitor center current location on the Temple Green. Latter-day Saint opponents wrote in a letter to apostles David A. Bednar, Garrett W. Gong, and others, please go to the Lord on our behalf. Although Nauvoo has a large LDS presence, we are still a multi-faith community, they stated, and we are trying to find common ground with common interests and goals. Indeed, the church could make this such a win-win for this community if they would just move it a couple of 100 feet to the west. Janet Hill, a transplanted Utahn who ran an art gallery in Nauvoo until earlier this fall, said in an interview, they could regain the good feelings in the community. The same thing we heard in Fairview. If you'll just make it fit within the zoning, everyone wins. Why won't you do this?
Welcome you. Yeah, yes. We welcome you. Just please. And I even hate the word concession, because the applicant should not be making concessions. They say that over and over. Just be neighborly. Do the neighborly thing. The greater good. Everybody gets what they want. Everybody wins.
And again, this is a faithful LDS writing this. Sadly, she added, the wrangling has only escalated in recent weeks. An informal meeting at a restaurant turned into a shouting match, Hill recalled, with one woman yelling at another saying that the prophet has asked us to support this.
Yeah, we hear this a lot. So, and again, they brought up the fact that Nauvoo is a multi-faith community. You might not think so, but it is. Nauvoo has many places of worship, among them United Methodist Church, St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church, Cornerstone of Zion Church, Living Hope Church, which is a non-denominational church, and a branch of the Community of Christ. So there are a lot of residents there that it would be really awesome and neighborly if the LDS Church took into consideration. This is interesting. Let's talk about this mindset a little bit, Landon. What does this say?
Yeah, not listening to opponents' worries or not remembering Hinckley's purported promise, Speed, a Nauvoo resident, said, leaves some Nauvoo residents feeling betrayed. Inside the church, the message seems to be that all Latter-day Saint opponents do not follow the prophet, he said, and outsiders are religious bigots.
Yeah.
That has created a feeling of victimization that Nauvoo is full of people who hate the church, Speed said. They use religious fervor to say that they are fighting for religious freedom. Marker, LDS, said he knows some opponents have felt judged by fellow Latter-day Saints, but he added most of them are very good people. It's just a difference of opinion.
Wow, this could be written in Fairview. If you go back, some of those phrases there, the victimization, the feeling that, can you take it back one? The feeling that there's religious persecution, that the whole town is full of people that hate the church. That is complete misinformation in Fairview, as it is here. It's pretty clear when everybody says, just have your temple or visitor center, meet with the codes, and put it somewhere where it's going to be a benefit to the entire community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we really wanted to hit on that point. Of course, the idea of bigotry that is not what's happening. And that is misinformation. So I don't think we can stress that enough. Can we, Landon?
Yeah.
And
And
the
they're simply
similarities.
enforcing the code that the church put in place.
Yeah, for simply enforcing the code. And the same in Fairview. We really wanted to hit on that it's such a similar scenario, only in this case, these are predominantly LDS members. So anybody that says, there's religious bigotry or persecution, that simply isn't what's happening in any of these towns where we follow temples.
Yeah. So the letter goes on. You want me to read that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Some members are appealing to leaders in Salt Lake City to help settle the dispute amicably and treat their neighbors with grace. So some LDS are stepping up saying, Salt Lake, help us out here. Our history is here. Our faith is here. One of the most beautiful temples in the world sits on this bluff, and yet we are unable to go forward without repeating history, the Latter-day Saint opponents wrote to the apostles. We appeal to you in the gentlest of terms, but with a true hope that the Lord would reconsider and build this visitor center nearby rather than on the temple green. It would be a true act of love, mercy, and generosity. We love our little village. We love our neighbors, and we do not want them to conclude that they have been lied to again and deceived as they do now. This gift would change everything, and it would save a landscape that has been promised. When Latter-day Saints assure themselves that fellow residents will just get over it, Janet Hill said, she gently reminds them, this is Nauvoo. People have long memories.
Wow. And that again feels so familiar, doesn't it? A lot of people in all these other cities say, as soon as the temple's built, you'll understand, it'll be a blessing, everything will go back to normal. The parallels are just amazing to me.
Yeah, you can't get any closer than that. That's for sure.
All right, now let's look at the final application that they put in front of the city on Halloween. Ooh.
Yeah, so they
and this is the one where they finally have all their ducks in a row, right? They know what to say. They know how to say it. This is the third application.
They've just had something said in general conference that supports that this is a sacred space as defined by the church.
Yep. So now we have the description. And again, it had the name of a person, not the church, on the applicant. So that was interesting. Same person. The description of proposed development specify the purpose, use of each structure. What does it say there, Landon?
One-story visitor center with on-site car parking and additional off-street parking lot with bus loading and unloading north of Young Street. A minor modification was made to the north parking lot to accommodate the bus loading area. No changes were made to the property south of Young Street. Additional information regarding the proposed use of the structure is included in the supplemental quick fact sheet included herewith, as well as in the original application submitted on July 14, 2023, and the addendum submitted on September 6, 2023.
So there's a lot more documentation explaining the purpose of this building. So let's pause here where we have some notes. Here we go.
Now let's look at what they say. How will the visitor center be used? As with church meeting houses and temples, the visitor center will be dedicated to teaching about Christ, the purpose and importance of the temple and ordinances performed therein, and other core doctrines of the church. To this end, it will feature a beautiful Tiffany stained glass window of Christ, newly commissioned artwork, a cutaway model of the temple, a children's learning area, a theater featuring a new film about the temple, stonework and other objects from the original temple, and windows looking out onto the Nauvoo temple. Its architectural style and modest height will complement the temple and preserve views of the historic Nauvoo landscape and Mississippi River. The visitor center will allow members of the church to share and practice their faith, as it will welcome visitors seeking to learn more about the temple. As circumstances require, the church may also hold its most fundamental worship service, sacrament meeting, in the visitor center's theater. In all uses, the church's objective will be to maintain a reverent and contemplative atmosphere appropriate for the visitor center's sacred purpose.
So now they're going to have sacrament meeting in the visitor center. Are they just making this up as they go along?
They are clearly making this up as they go.
Yeah, I think that note right there.
Yeah, well, they start saying that it's built on a location where a previous temple visitor center was also located in 2002 until 2007. The mayor wrote they called it that. It was there used to be a Catholic
It was
school
a
there
school, that's right.
that the church bought the property from, and then they utilized it, and they brought youth out for temple training or something like that, and they therefore called it a visitor center. That's not what it was, but they're calling it that to make the argument. So you can see why these people would be upset by this, because this is the exact same thing they've always had in mind, yet they tried to mention how it wasn't a meeting house, how it was completely different than a meeting house.
They went out of their way to say that.
They went out of their way to tell them that it didn't have any of these big gatherings, that it wasn't going to have Sunday service and all of this. And by the third application, it's a sacred space where we meet and hold sacrament meetings. It's like our meeting houses. All of a sudden, they've completely changed what this visitor center is. Why? Because they needed to have that change so they could meet RLUIPA. So it's the exact same reason that they started talking about, why they started talking about steeple doctrines and mass of the walls. They're making it up in order to try to enforce the RLUIPA law on citizens who are saying this doesn't meet our zoning codes.
Yep. So it really makes you watch conference and listen to things in a new way, because you start going, why are they saying that? What do they need that for? That kind of happened to me when they started mentioning the mass of the walls, when they were talking about the McKinney Temple. I was like, why are they saying that? I understand the steeple height doctrine, but why the mass of the walls? And then I realized, well, even their buildings, just the mass of the walls are above code. So they have to mention that in a religious context in order to activate RLUIPA. It's all about that. The very same reason that Stevenson in his talk said a visitor center is a sacred space. They can refer back to that now. They've got to get it into the talks and the articles and everything. So it's really fascinating if you start unraveling it and following the playbook backwards, right?
Is this church led by revelation, or is it led by religion or by legal needs? Whatever the legal need is, we all of a sudden get a revelation on it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So this slide shows the difference in the two applications. The second application, the visitor center, is different than ordinary church meeting houses or other church sites. Sunday worship services, as you go on, do not take place here.
Service projects.
They take place in meeting houses or other church sites, but not in the visitor center. This is what the second application said. Here's what the third application.
Hold on, go back. As explained, because there's a lot of correlation between the two if we read them all the way through. As explained, most instruction in visitor centers takes place through displays, audiovisual presentations, and interactive kiosks. Church missionaries are also available to answer individual questions. But as you see in the red, the second application clearly said that these things like Sunday worship services are not going to take place in the visitor center. Third application, totally different story. Why don't you read that, Landon?
The visitor center will be dedicated exclusively for religious worship and instruction.
Wait,
and will not be used,
not, and now it says exclusively.
Now it's exclusively.
Just a matter of months.
It will not be used for commercial purposes. As a place of religious worship and instruction, some of the uses of the building will be similar to the adjacent church meeting house. It
just barely said it was completely different. Yes. And it said unlike a meeting house.
And temple will also still having its own unique purpose and design. As with church meeting houses, now look at the one before, different than ordinary church houses. Now, as with church meeting houses, the visitor center will be dedicated to teaching about Christ, the purpose and importance of the temple and ordinances performed therein, and other core doctrines. As circumstances require, the church may also hold its most fundamental worship service, sacrament meeting, in the visitor center theater. What did they say here?
That won't happen there. The worship services will not take place in the visitor center. So it's like a magic trick. Abracadabra, you're a visitor center that is a place of worship, right?
They've absolutely worded it to make it, and you can see why the mayor, former mayor, was so upset by this. that he said, you guys are just playing us.
Yep.
And I'm sick and tired of it.
Yep.
And after 20 years, a town of 1,000 people loses one of its strongest civic-minded leaders because he can't continue to deal with the monkey business that the church is bringing to his town.
Yep, that's just sad. So, as Landon mentioned before, in and out of this whole process has been Area 70, Jeremiah Morgan, and it comes down to the final meeting now where they're going to present the application and he is going to speak on behalf of the church. And we do have that recorded, and we do want to play that for you guys because I know you're now getting used to watching these long city meetings, right? This is not that long, but it certainly is interesting. And keep in mind that many of the members of the town council are LDS, and you will be shocked at the interaction between the area rep and the town council. And in fact, he said later, one of our sources said that this was the most uncomfortable he had ever felt doing any kind of presentation, and you guys will see why. So let's get some popcorn, pause it, take a break, and let's watch.
Both of those in turn, and begin with the first one. The Nauvoo City Code authorizes construction of a place of worship in this location that we're talking about tonight. What is a place of worship, and who gets to decide where that is? The law and courts answer this question unequivocally. The church decides. Some may say, unless you have a preacher and a sermon, it is not a place of worship. But that is not the rule or the standard. In our temples, for example, we have neither preachers nor sermons, yet they are the most sacred places of worship on the earth for us. Or there will absolutely be times in which sermons will be given in this Nauvoo Temple's Visitor Center and the administration of the sacrament. Here is what our website says about visitor centers. Quote, each visitor center is unique, but all of them highlight the commitment of Latter-day Saints to follow Jesus Christ. Other subjects include the purpose of life and the importance of families, end quote. In our visitor centers, we teach of Jesus Christ, we preach of Jesus Christ, and we testify of Jesus Christ. Hopefully that's hello. That's good. Can you still hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. We do not transact business or merely hand out brochures and maps. We worship Jesus Christ. In fact, the centerpiece of the visitor center that we're talking about will be a Tiffany stained glass window, 10 foot by 7 foot, of Jesus Christ, and a demonstration of what you have here in the first picture. The visitor center will also have a specific bank of windows looking out onto the temple, demonstrating both its purpose, but also the need and importance of proximity to the temple, which is the second picture that you see there. This bank of windows looking out onto the temple. Here is what one of our apostles, Elder Gary E. Stevenson, said last month on this topic in our General Conference of the Church. After describing temples, this is what he said, quote, other holy places include meeting houses, seminary buildings and institutes, and church history sites and visitor centers. He then implored us to stand in holy places like visitor centers. Should this honorable court, excuse me,
There's that quote from General Conference.
Yeah, and you probably have to jack your volume up. It's a little hard to hear him. Turn it up as much as possible.
No, you cannot. It is our fundamental and uniquely American freedom of religion. Though we may not worship as the Catholics do or the Methodists or other religions, the Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center is most certainly a place of worship for us under the heavens and the law. Finally, on this point, 2 law firms have given this Honorable City Council legal opinions, stating unequivocally that the proposed Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center is a place of worship under the Nauvoo City Code and cannot legally be denied. Even your city attorney has conceded that it is a permitted use. And so I plead with you to follow the law and honor our religious freedom. On the second point, major point I wanted to make is property rights of American citizens and churches. Now in law school, which I attended some years ago, They taught an introductory course on property law, often describing property rights as a collection of sticks. And one of those sticks, we are taught, is the right to use your own property however you wish, as long as it's not illegal. So who then gets to decide where and how the church uses its property? More specifically, I would say, who gets to decide the location on its property where the church builds the Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center? The law and courts answer this question again, unequivocally. The property owner gets to decide. Now, some may say, and I've heard it, they are not opposed to the building of the Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center, but just not at that location. Put it at another location, many have said, or some have said. But that is not the law, and it is antithetical to our basic American values and property rights. Imagine, all of us, if you would, you want to build an addition onto your home. Maybe it's a sunroof or a porch. And you have decided where to put it. A law authorizes you to put it anywhere you select on your home. But others say to you, well, do not put it there. Instead, put it somewhere else. How would you feel as a property owner to be told that? That's not American property values. Let me speak to the process for selecting this site. First, other locations were certainly considered, including the Horton Hill location or even down the hill from this property we're talking about here. Second, senior priesthood leaders came out personally and looked at the site and walked the property. The various aspects of sites were considered, including the safety and the proximity to the temple. And this site, which is already owned by the church, was determined to be by far, the best location on all of those criteria. All the necessary internal church approvals were received and was determined and in a process that is not unlike how a temple site is selected. This is the only site that was approved, while the others were dismissed. So I then return to the same question I asked on the first one. Should this Honorable Council therefore reject the property owner's decision, which is fully authorized by law and made at the highest levels by the property owner, as to where to build on its own property? No, cannot. It is, again, our fundamental and uniquely American right of property. Some may not want it there or think it better in another location, but just like building an addition to your own home, the law leaves to the property owner that decision. And again, I plead with you to follow the law and honor our fundamental American rights of property as you would want for yourself.
I don't understand where this guy's getting this from. No homeowner can just go add an addition to their home without the proper approvals from the proper zoning code in their town. You have to go to your city and you have to apply for a permit and you have to follow the codes. You don't get to say it's my uniquely American right to put anything on my property that I want. It is not.
Go try it. I know people that have tried it. You cannot do that. This guy doesn't seem to understand that there are zoning codes for everyone.
Yeah, see, and he's the assistant district attorney of the state. That is beyond me, but.
Yeah.
Now I have a collection of other miscellaneous items I wanted to address as well. And I'll just sort of march through those a little bit here. The first one is this location safe? And does it meet all the criteria of the Nauvoo City Code? The answer is absolutely. The application not only addresses this, but makes the location safer than it ever has been before. The Planning Commission already reviewed and approved, meaning they consider these safety questions, addressing all pertinent safety concerns. There is now, at the recommendation, a four-way stop and will be crosswalks. Buses have been rerouted. We've already passed a resolution to change some of those change that bus route and include school buses. Buses will be rerouted and not near the school. The road will be widened to allow two-way traffic and parking. Entrances to parking have been adjusted, making it the safest location. Then every criteria identified in the code has been met. And our understanding is that all technical requirements have been met and the application is in compliance. But before I proceed any further, I want to highlight at least a couple of the specific criteria that the city code asks to consider. The first one is general health and safety requirement. On this point, the law is clear. It is presumed once, because it is a permitted use, it is presumed to qualify as long as it is permitted use, which your attorney has conceded. The Planning Commission and the City Council have not come forward with any reasons why this criteria is not met. On the second one, safe traffic circulation and safe driveway locations. We have studied this and we have presented on it, and we have made adjustments to improve both flow and safety over what exists now. Now, as to the remaining, those are two that I just want to highlight, that criteria have been met. Now, as to the remaining criteria with respect to the code, those have been comprehensively addressed in the letter to this city council by counsel for the church, and it is before you, so you can review that. The application unquestionably meets all of the criteria of the code. Now, because I don't want anybody to be surprised, should the application be denied, this council will leave the church with no alternatives other than to appeal to other legal authority. To those who might be inclined.
There it is. That's the threat to sue. If the council doesn't approve this, we'll be left with no other option but to go with other appeals. He's sticking this out right now, throwing it out there. You don't pass this, we will sue you.
And
This
he's
is
so friendly. He's like, "Hey, just give us no other option than to just," he's just
and
so
and he's
friendly.
not there representing he's not there as a lawyer, he's there as a general authority.
Yes.
This is our church leadership.
Yep.
This is how they behave.
Yeah,
at the
we should make that clear, because I might have confused people at the beginning. He happens to be the Assistant Attorney General, I believe, but he is here in the capacity of an area rep. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
To vote against this, I ask you to make findings based upon the specific criteria as required by law, as we have addressed every concern. And please let us know, and not deny the application based on anything like that. We will certainly address it, as we did with the bus route when that was changed. We made adjustments to that. I want to speak to public opinion. While there are, you see a large audience here, and and I would say while there are many things that call for public opinion, including those involving this honorable council, this is not one of them. Public opinion is not the arbiter of whether the church has the right under the law to build an authorized building on its property at the location it deems to be the best location. Opposition certainly is not new to the church or its church leaders. It has been so from the beginning of the church, both by those outside and even members of the church. And but that is not the question here. The only question before this council is whether it meets the criteria of the code and protects our freedom of religion and our property rights. To allow the opinion, public opinion, to defeat those constitutional rights of freedom of religion or property, as I previously discussed, is illegal. I plead with you, please do not.
So what he just said is, it doesn't matter what you guys think. The only thing that matters is our rights, our property rights, and that we get to follow our religion. You guys have no say in this, is basically what he's telling them.
I feel like this is a transplant from what we heard in Fairview, although this took place, months earlier in Nauvoo, but it's the same sentiment, isn't it? It's us. And what they're really saying is it's God.
And again, he calls everyone opponents. The church has had opponents for forever.
Right.
These are people who are simply saying, move the building to another place, which is where you told us that this would not be built on. Move it down the hill where it's not blocking the view and where it's out of the way of the school and everything else. Yep. And you can have your visitor center. Just put it somewhere else.
Yep. Be community minded, please.
You own 40% of the property in the city. You can probably find a space.
Now, what about President Hinckley? You may hear some about President Hinckley. I want to speak to that. It has been reported that previous missionaries said, quote, President Hinckley has the final say on everything connected with the church. He wants no buildings built upon up on the hill so that nothing obstructs the view from the temple and the statues. There are several reasons why this assertion has truly no bearing upon the building of the Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center at this site. First, we have searched the records, including President Hinckley's own journals, and there is no record that he said this. Second, the statement was actually made by a missionary that did not have authority to speak for President Hinckley or the church. Third, look at the actual statement itself. If it was actually made as reported, it would not have any impact because building this Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center at this site as proposed does not in fact obstruct the view from the temple or the statues. Furthermore, the Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center will be a small fraction of the sprawling complex of buildings that was once there before and which the church removed. As you can see, actually, a portion of it in the picture 4. The Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center will occupy a small portion of that. In fact, less than 10% of the property. Additionally, we have individuals that were there at the time with President Hinckley because they were considering other proposals with respect to this site. What is more, there was a temple visitor center actually at this site. You can see on the 4th picture, that is a picture of the old academy. It was a temple visitor center. Forgive me if I once again return to the question I've asked several times. Should this honorable council therefore reject the decision of our church and its leaders today? No, it is our fundamental right as a religion. In the course of our history, we have, of course, been denied our rights. Please do not do so here. The last 2 things I wanted to mention is, the first one is maintaining the open space and views. Some have argued, for example, that property has become a sort of community green space. This property, however, is owned by the church and is not a city park. There is actually a public park not far away. The law, of course, does not require us to use our private property for maintaining open spaces or views. Nevertheless, the church has worked very hard to minimize any impact in this regard, made adjustments to the building, made adjustments to the location. Building the Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center will have very little impact on the views or open spaces. Less than 10%, as I mentioned earlier, of the property will be used. There will still be more than ample space to gather on the grass and enjoy the expansive views from nearly all locations.
Okay, so he just told us every reason why the property, that what President Hinckley said, that they'd leave it open. Just like any apologist, he makes every argument. No, he didn't say that. It was a missionary who didn't have any authority who said it, which we find out is actually the spokesperson for the church who said it, which is speaking for the church, but they say they have no authority. Then he goes on to say, oh, we're not required to have any open space. We're not required to let you use our property. Yet every one of these we see, the church goes and says, the grounds are open to everybody. Here he's saying, oh, we're not required to use our property in any way or to let you have access. We have a fundamental right. We've always had people who tell us, beat us down, and we're not going to allow it. So you better vote for it. This guy is just this is very infuriating, and the city council responds back here in just a few minutes.
And I have to say, it'd be interesting for the people from Fairview and some of these other cities to hear this statement that says we don't have any obligation to open our grounds to you, right? Or something like that. That's interesting because the opposite is being said everywhere else. You will all be welcome. We will always open our grounds to you.
That's right. And remember, they said, don't listen to any source that's not LDS source. Well, okay, this was the public relations spokesperson for the church that said this. Many people said they talked to President Hinckley in the town and he told them personally, but now he's saying, don't listen to those people. That has no effect. We can't find anything in writing that said that, therefore it wasn't said. But these people were there. The people on this council were there. And
Right.
they bring that up here in a minute.
Well,
So
we talked to several people that said, I heard that personally, like several people. So I think they're kind of wounded that their relationship and experience with President Hinckley, which was special to them, is now just being completely discounted. It didn't happen. He didn't say it. You misunderstood. That all sounds so familiar.
and our legal rights trump anything we've ever said in the past.
Yeah.
So
And I want to speak to the unique nature of this Temple Visitor Center. We have very few Temple Visitor Centers throughout the world, only in unique and significant locations like Nauvoo and also Salt Lake City and Rome. Most temples do not have a Temple Visitor Center. Why is this so important to our people? The very legacy of temples and their importance to our worship and sacred ordinances began right here in Nauvoo. We want to share that with those who cannot go to the temple, those who visit, the legacy of our beliefs in temples. I plead with you once again to follow the law and honor our right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience, as we would honor your right to worship how, where, and what you may. I ask you, please vote in favor of this application for the church. Thank you.
Can we ask any questions?
Yeah. I'm happy for you to ask questions, and Terry can also help with that. Terry, please.
I just wonder why you weren't here when this first started. Instead of all the misinformation that came out, and they presented this as a visitor center / historical museum, which by our code is not authorized in that. And then it seems like we had to do a lot of word manipulation, the bait and switch. It just makes things unclear. And if they had come out and been truthful in the beginning and said, this is what it is, it would have saved a lot of heartache and issues. But I just don't know why. It seems like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing.
Well,
And it makes it hard on a city like us. We're a small community, it throws a big wedge,
And
I'm just, yeah, that's fine.
to Jim, to that, we apologize that, if the process didn't work as we would want. I'm here in Nauvoo all the time, and I have responsibility from an ecclesiastical standpoint for Nauvoo. And, it is true that in some instances we don't communicate well one with another. But the purpose of this Temple Visitor Center has really never changed from the beginning. The wording that has been used based upon what has been asked and so forth has changed, it is true, but the purpose has never changed, because it was always going to be, this is why the proximity to the temple is so important. It was always going to be about trying to connect our people to the temple. But I think Terry wanted to say something.
And that's fine. It's just the idea that it started wrong.
I know.
I mean, if it had come out, what you're doing.
we're so sorry. We're so sorry that we changed it. We didn't make it clear that this was not a visitor center, that it was really a house of worship. And we're so sorry over and over again. This was manipulation of the code. Anyone can see it from the changes in their write-up, that they wrote it up to make it so that they could make an argument in court to try to use RLUIPA. And nobody's fooled by this. This is a small town city council. They're not fooled by this.
No, they're not.
They're just powerless to do anything about it.
Exactly. Yeah, that I liked that tone is so similar to what we heard, especially in McKinney and in Fairview. Just from the bottom of our heart, we just humbly. I mean, I know that's how Mormons tend to speak, and it's been a while since I've attended, but just that tone, doesn't that kind of grate on you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. When
Because
he
they
goes,
don't mean it.
we're so sorry, and it was so unfortunate, and we really didn't communicate well. But if you didn't understand, we're going to sue you, and we're going to bring all hell upon your city, and we will bankrupt your city to get our building. It is
But we're
so
so
special to
sorry.
us.
We're so sorry. Yeah, it's
What?
that passive aggressive, whatever it is. It's like punching someone in the face and going, from the bottom of my heart, I don't want to be doing this. I apologize, but
And then hitting them again.
yeah. But no, the town council, you'll see them get more and more frustrated because they're not they're not putting up with this. They
Yep.
don't really have any power in this situation, ironically, but yeah, they're going to let them have it. Chicken
Here-
on the way down, right?
That's right. Let's go on.
Center, and this is what it was gonna be.
I hope it would have been no.
It would have been a lot better. I got one other question, and it's just
Well,
something.
and on that point, I would just say, we're imperfect. I mean, we're trying. I mean,
no, none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
I know, it's just,
Believe me.
it's life.
I make all kinds of mistakes. If all my children were lined up here, it would be a disaster. So.
When they started pushing this, or started presenting this, there were gonna be 150,000 tourists, additional tourists coming. That's what, when these town hall meetings were at,
Not from us.
I think I can find a whole bunch of people back there that will
So
say
on that point, I'll just answer real quickly. We don't anticipate that. This won't change truly the number of people that come into Nauvoo. It won't change that largely.
And I stated that several times in the meetings too.
But I mean, it's just, you present it this way, and it's the same thing. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing.
If I can respond, Jim.
Okay, that's fine.
If I can respond to your first question. So when we started this process back in April of this year, we verified with the city to understand what the zone was that this building was going to be located in. And at that time, it was indicated to us that this was in the OM zone, the outdoor museum, which allowed for visitor centers. And then at the next meeting, we came to this next city council meeting, and it was identified by one of the citizens that the zoning had changed a number of years ago, and that wasn't relayed to us. And so the OM zone allows for visitor centers. So at that point, we didn't need to bring up the religious teachings and things that we would be doing in the building, because we were just getting the visitor center. When it was clarified that we are in a residential zone, and churches, temples, and other places of worship, the way the wording is put into that zone, is that then we needed to make sure that it was understood that this visitor center could still qualify underneath the residential piece of it as other place of worship. And we brought forth the teachings and understandings of the things that would be going on in there. We talked about the temple ordinances that are going on in there, the picture of the Savior that we've seen there. We discussed that. And so it's not really a bait and switch. It's just an understanding and clarification from both sides, the cities and the churches, of what zone it was actually in and how the building had to be presented.
But I mean, that's part of the background investigation. I mean.
Yes, we did our investigation. We asked the city. And
Well,
and I even went, you even took me to the back room after the meeting that was identified and gave me the current zoning map.
That showed you
That
that
showed the
residential.
but we didn't have that zoning map to begin with. We were going off the one that was on the city's website, which isn't up to date.
Okay.
And even as of today,
And that's
that
fine.
map is still on your
Is it?
website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know, I mean, the church helped us.
Yes,
figure
no,
this
I
out,
understand,
too, And they're the
I
ones
understand.
that said to make that residential, so I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure that the church knew that it was residential.
Somebody around the church, somewhere,
I
a
know.
missionary here, I don't know who.
I know. And it's
There you have it again. He said someone from the church, he said the church is the one who asked for it to be zoned residential. How do you guys not know that it was residential? And he goes, oh, some missionary, it was somebody someone with no power did this, but now we're fixing it. Oh, we changed. Yes, we thought it was commercial, so we didn't put an accurate description of what it was. Once we found out it was residential, then we said, oh, it's got a picture of Jesus in it. It is a religious facility. And we rewrote it to make it a religious facility so it would meet the zoning.
Yeah, and I love that. They do this all the time. That was just a volunteer, right? How many
Yep.
times do they say that? When you see somebody in trouble, like in the newspaper, it's like a volunteer. Like they never claim anybody. Everyone's a volunteer. Nobody knows what they're doing. It's
No one has
such
any power.
plausible deniability. No one has any power, as they say in Fairview all the time in the other cities. Where are the decision makers? Who's even pulling these strings? All of us ask ourselves that question. It could be the Illuminati.
And why not say when they go up and say, that one of the apostles said that that these were sacred sites. Well, he's just a volunteer. What
That's
he
right.
says
He's
doesn't
just
matter.
speaking as a man, exactly.
Yeah.
No, and you'll see the council start pushing back now more and more at everything that's said.
Pardon me. I just want to make sure it's known that the opposition that was found wasn't to the church, it was to the original site plan. So you said that the church is used to opposition and used to things. The opposition from anyone on the council was not to the church or to your worshiping. It was the original site plan and the things that were left out of it. So I just wanted to be on the record. We weren't opposed to the church or the worshiping.
No,
and I feel like the point to be made that you can worship how you want to, you can worship, you can. And I don't think that there was any question from the city council that you were going to worship, but originally, as has already been discussed, worship was left out. And so that's where confusion came in. And then when we went months with the church's attorney saying, please don't discuss it yet, don't discuss it yet. And then it kind of became, and this is, I'm trying not to be derogatory, but almost more like a dog and pony show, like let's build up and we're worshiping. Okay, but that's not what you said originally. And that's where a lot of the confusion came in.
And I hope that we clarified it. I mean, the purpose that was intended for the visitor center has never changed, but the emphasis based upon what was it thought to be expected and so forth has changed. And so, again, everybody can have differences of opinions, and we're certainly, even members of the church, everybody can have their own opinion. That's all good. There's no problem with that. But want to make clear that this is. I mean, I will tell you that I became involved because the senior leaders of the church asked me to be involved, and so it was important to them. And this is an important project. And on that point, I actually, not speaking to public opinion, but this is important to the members of our church, and we've got lots of here. And so I would ask those that I mean, this is not a public opinion thing, but those that this is important to, the building of this Temple Visitor Center. If you would stand. And I said it's not a public opinion issue, but it is important. It is important to our people. And so, yeah.
And then just another little thing. So in the Journal Pilot paper that was, with the ever-present quote that President Hinckley didn't want things there, you said that she wasn't authorized to speak. I knew Sister Louisanne, and she was called here as a public relations missionary. So she was given, whether he said it, she overheard it, or something. So I just hope that any other public relations missionaries 20 years down the road don't say, oh, they didn't have authority to speak, because when she was here, I believe she did have every authority to speak on their behalf, because that was what her whole calling was.
Yeah, and so I mean, I don't want to get too much into the details or technicalities of that, but generally speaking, those that speak on behalf, like the state president, who is actually the spokesperson for the church here, not the what we call communications directors now. Now, Sister Sims is awesome, and now hold on one second. Sister Sims, who's back there, is awesome, and she does communication, but she doesn't necessarily speak on behalf of the church unless she's.
Yeah, well, and working with Sister Louisanne was the stake president, who was my dad, and so I
got it. Yes.
Like she did have. I mean, if he couldn't be at the meeting to be the spokesperson, she was at the meeting to be the spokesperson on their behalf. So that's just a bit of that. So.
I would like to say that the little stand-up thing there was not a very good representation of what we have had come across our emails and letters and talks. That was not a fair representation.
And my point on that was, again, this doesn't have anything to do with public opinion. This has everything to do with.
Okay, hang on.
Why do you ask them to stand up if it doesn't matter?
No,
why do we need to see that number?
Yeah.
You're the one that told us it didn't matter, and then you asked them to flex their muscles for you.
Yeah. No, what?
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah.
So
we'll all agree and head out.
Yeah, so what I was trying to show is that it is important to our people. That's all I'm trying to show. Not that again.
Boy, send in the cavalry, huh? Boy, this guy is really doing them a lot of favors. These people were there when this stuff happened. They knew the people who told them this.
Yep.
They're going, the person who told us was the church PR person that you guys sent here to be the PR. Well, she really can't speak for us, you know. Well, who can? Well, the stake president. Well, that was my dad.
That's my dad. That's my favorite part. And we should point out, this is the mayor that's speaking, right? Who says that?
That's
Yes,
right.
she's LDS. Most of these people that you're hearing on the council are LDS. That's the whole point.
That's correct.
You can have a different thought than what the church is necessarily pushing in a town. If it, be civic minded. You can also be religious minded, but be civic minded too.
That's right. And this guy is just, he's, we'll wait. He gets to something else.
Well,
that just
and
really
again, we
gets
should
me.
say he's been put in a hard position by the church. They said, why are you here? They don't understand the structure. And we run into this with every town. What's a bishop? What's a stake president? What's an area authority? Why are they here? What's a temple district? Why are people coming from 100 miles away? They don't understand the things that the rest of us just take for granted. It's very foreign to them. So they're like, who is this guy? Why is he here? And he's been put in this fire, this hotbed, but he's towing the party line and doing the body language is so obsequious.
Yes.
It's so pardon, and yet at the same time, he knows he's going to get what he wants in the end.
Your concern is, we hear
Yeah.
your concern. It means so much to
From the
us,
bottom of my
but
heart.
we are
And I
doing nothing about it. Yes.
love how he made people stand up and they're like, don't do that.
Yeah.
It's like,
This is great. Let's
it's
go
something.
on.
Okay.
Public opinion, it could be all over the place, and that's not the determining factor of whether or not this should be approved.
But some of your people, as you're calling
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
have also been against
Yeah, I agree.
the site.
Yeah.
So again, this was not a fair representation.
Anything else from the council?
Well, I've got one other thing though. And this didn't matter if it's a visitor center that's getting put on the flats. I don't have the resources for a police department to actually take care of all this. We have enough problems right now with Dollar General, Casey's having signs on the doors, no backpacks. And we all know what's happened, or they wouldn't be asked that. I don't have the resources. I have infrastructure issues that we've got problems with. And it doesn't matter if the visitor center goes there, the Temple Visitor Center there, if it was on the flats or if it was on the other end of Nauvoo, we're always going to have these issues. Yeah, somehow we need to work on.
Yeah, and that is I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that Terry has the answer to that either in terms of those challenges. It's certainly we want to be good partners and do what we can to assist in whatever way we can. In terms of
something we can sit down and talk.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Because we're going to need some assistance in order to.
Yeah, I hope over the course. I hope over the course of the past many years, I hope the church has demonstrated that we try to be good neighbors. We're not perfect. We try to be good neighbors. We try to assist.
We had a pilot program that went on for I think 5 years, where they took all the properties on the flats, pulled them off the tax rolls. And then they did a pilot program that was payment in lieu of taxes. We did that for 5 years. Well, after that 5-year study, they decided that wasn't worth it at all. So they gave us the old kick to the curb and decreased that down. I find it hard sometimes to trust, that we keep getting kicked to the curb. We're a small community. We don't have resources for attorneys, but, and then another question, you made a comment about people own their property and we can't tell them what to do. So are you saying that our zoning code book is worthless?
No.
But you just said that if people want to build, they can build where they want.
Yeah, as long as it's legally authorized, we should be able to use our property how.
Okay, but the statement kind of made it vague, and it kind of because we've got zoning where in a house if you've got a porch here, you know, sometimes if you don't have the setbacks, you can't put the porch there.
Agreed, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I totally.
But I mean, the way it came
That's
out
to be
was
legally.
like, don't let people tell you where to build your porch.
Yeah, as long as this
Okay.
was legally authorized.
I'm just trying to get some.
No, I totally agree. I mean, if it's illegal,
It just kind of sounded like you were saying.
I didn't.
Our code book.
So he just here agreed that yes, if there's zoning codes, you can't just build what you want. Oh, yes, I absolutely agree. No, don't misunderstand me. And the guy's saying, so you're saying our zoning codes don't mean anything? No, that's not what I'm saying. They just don't mean anything to us because
the
we're a
key.
religion.
Right, because we're a religion. And this is again a bigger picture, isn't it, Landon, that we talked about, and how you have this idea that religion trumps everything, any civic code, any zoning code. And that's, as the church likes to say, a slippery slope.
Slippery slope. Well, let's keep going.
No, I did not mean that. I did not intend to say that. So, yeah.
And we are meeting all the legal requirements of this. The
Well,
40-foot
I understand that,
setback.
but the comment.
Yeah, no, I
And because I mean, I can do away with it right now. I don't. I feel that really our code book means nothing right now. Because
we live and die by the code books around the world.
I know, but more or less with this coming through, we had a person that wanted to put in a trailer court.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's to say that he doesn't come back and say, well, he's going to build a church out there on that for his trailer court?
Depends on if it's authorized. I mean, if it's authorized in the law, then he's the person.
It's not in the zoning piece of it.
Well, I know, but there's a lot of things now that, you know, people say, this is my house, I'm going to make it a church. It opens.
Yeah, and the difficulty is in that regard. So the churches get to decide. I mean, imagine if we tried to begin to decide what was somebody's place of worship and how they worship. I mean, governments. This is a real danger for governments to get into, to try to decide what is a place of worship or what is worship. I mean, there's a reason why the law so broadly defines worship. And so if that's the church's approach and view of it, again, I mean, even if a sermon, in a classic sense, a sermon and a preacher, that's not necessarily the case. Even though, like I said, the most important place of worship for us is the temple, and there's neither a sermon nor a preacher in the temple.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question, Jim.
No, that's all right.
Oh, okay.
There we go. This is the assistant district attorney for the state of Missouri, and he can't answer the simple question. If by your interpretation, anyone can build and just say, my house is a church and get around my codes. And he's going, oh, it's dangerous for the government to get in there. Why is it any less dangerous than for any religious zealot to be able to overrule any government law? That's a very slippery slope as well. He hemmed and hawed about it and could not give a good answer as to why anyone couldn't just go in and ignore any building code because they're a church. It's just like, oh, sorry, that's the way it is. I get to do whatever I want. And
Well, I think he knows the answer, but it doesn't fit his narrative that he's trying to portray here. So he can't say it.
He can't say it. So then he goes, does that answer your question? No.
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 Well, I guess it answers your question, Landon, because you keep saying that you yourself wants to start a church. You have all kinds of ideas about how worshiping on your boat, making sure that you worship on your ATVs, exactly, right? Nobody can stop you. It's your God-given right.
That's right. That's the claim that's coming here. So we're seeing it all laid out here by this guy. Let's keep going.
Again, he's put in a bad spot.
Okay, anything else from the council?
Just in case, just to let you know that this is the people that are parked in the tour bus parking out there, just let you know that is not legal. So
Along the highway?
Yeah.
That is posted.
The highway or the side street?
No, along the highway, right on the
Yeah.
highway.
Tour bus
That's
parking.
all posted for bus parking only. And I know there's probably like 10 cars out there, and I don't know if Brighton wants to go out and put warnings on all the cars. We have this issue in town with people that can't read signs and stuff that just do what.
So you're going to follow all the codes and laws, but you're illegal.
You're illegally parked. That's the greatest ending I've ever seen. Sir, your car, he's like, we promise to follow up. Sir, your car is illegally parked. Oh my goodness. I feel sorry for him though, because the church has put him in a really bad spot. He knows the laws and he has to, he has to do that. They all have to do it. I feel sorry for everybody, The institution has done this, not the people.
Well, yeah, but he is the institution. He's one of the leaders. So
Yeah,
if he doesn't
yeah.
have the guts, he's
Still
the
part of it.
assistant district attorney for the state. He should be standing up and saying this isn't right, church. He has both ecclesiastical and civic responsibilities, and you can't just ignore that. So.
Yep. And so I think the next thing is we will actually watch the vote that happened right after this. There, as we said, there were so many other people that stood up in the town and talked, much like you saw at Fairview, but we thought it was important to see the church's point of view there. And now the city council is going to vote, and they kind of weigh into, and to me, this is heartbreaking. And we've seen this in other cities.
It is, and it's kind of funny when you watch the vote because you can tell who the LDS people are because they don't make any comment.
That's right. Yes.
They just
Everyone
say yes.
else is,
and they're all dressed like they're in church.
Yeah,
so
but the mayor is LDS, and some of the others are too. I guess you should say the ones who are LDS and fully on board don't make any comment, but others are LDS, yet they're also very civic minded. And so, they're trying to express their feelings at what's happened to their town.
Yeah, absolutely.
Move on to item B, to discuss and take action on the revised site plan for the Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center, originally the Historic Visitor Center.
I'll make a motion that we approve the visitor center there, because all things to do that. And the criteria that we've asked as a city.
I second that.
Scott moves, Jeff seconds. Any discussion amongst the council members?
The only thing I've got to say is I know this is gone through, it meets the zoning. There's a lot of attorneys that have worked on this, and they've got this, and it does meet our regulations. The only thing that really bothers me is all the letters I've seen in the past that have come in recently that kind of stick it to where we're kind of getting bullied. But that's just my opinion. It's not really giving us an option, but
why can we leverage that?
So then don't vote that way. Any more discussion from the council? I have to say I agree with Jim. What was originally presented, as we've already stated many times, what was originally presented, I feel was not the proper use. But I feel now they have reworked, restructured, revised, resubmitted, and now just one of the things that I think put a sour taste in our mouth was when it was revised and all of a sudden, I want to say threat because that's what it felt like, threat of litigation. If you don't, then this is what we'll do. And that, even if that's not what was meant, I've heard from some of the people representing the church that, don't worry about that memo. We include that with all the site plans, but it wasn't included in the first site plan. So that kind of made it, and then also there was apologies for it being included in the second site plan. So I'm like, okay, so did you mean to threaten the city or did you not mean to threaten the city? Because it felt like a threat. And I think we could maybe not all agree on that, but it felt worse. So the motion on the table from Scott was to approve. The second was from Jeff. Any more discussion on it?
No.
If not, then let's do a roll call.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Boyles?
Yes, only because it does meet the law now. So.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes, only because it doesn't meet the law.
Ms. Atkinson?
My vote really doesn't matter at this point, but I am yes because it meets the law.
Mr. Sumner?
Yes.
Boo! That's a shame.
Well, that's a shame.
Pushing threaten the city and bullying.
Wow. Boo, they say,
Yeah.
because they're just so wounded, you know, that somebody with all the power can come into their town and do that. And there's nothing anybody can do. We've heard that boo literally or figuratively many times in the last 18 months, haven't we?
That's right. And you heard half the council say, yes, I'm voting, but only because I'm forced to, because, you know, we can't fight this.
Yeah, that was how Cody sounded. That was, I mean, Lone Mountain, that was another scenario with the campaign contributions, but yeah.
So if you don't see this as bullying and you think this is religious bigotry, here you are in a town that the church owns, and between the church and church members, at least 50% of the town property is owned, although only 10% actually pay property tax on that. The other 50% get to pay for all of that. And here they are in here, and this is what happens. They're bullied and they're forced to pay for it. And it's interesting because we talked to the residents and you could just feel how mad they were. They talked to us about how the church came in and they would take old homes that, you know, old Nauvoo homes that were falling apart, and they'd buy them for $300,000. And then they'd buy it for $300,000 and tear it down and then make some farm out of it or something to add to their collection. But as a result, the property value of all of their homes went up. So all these people who keep saying, oh, the property values go up around temples. Well, okay, that's exactly what happened here. The property values went up and the people said, my $60,000 home all of a sudden was being appraised at $300,000 and I was paying the property taxes on that.
Right. And they don't want to move. That's the thing.
They don't want to move.
They don't want to leave. That's their home.
And they're feeling that the church is doing this in order to force them out so they can build more of the property and take over more of the town. They want to own the town like they did before. And that's the feeling that a lot of the residents are getting.
Yeah, that was really sad to talk to some of them. All right, let's read this aftermath article. I don't know, on my screen, I see kind of a bar over some of the words, but I'm going to try to read around it. If you don't have that bar, Landon, then you can do it. It says the aftermath. Nauvoo lost its sovereignty last night because Utah will always control it, said Irene Tukafu, a Latter-day Saint temple worker in the town. Nauvoo has become a colony of Salt Lake City. So here's an active member that sees it how it is. They are no longer a sovereign town because of the bullying tactics. A couple weeks ago, the 82-year-old said she heard a Latter-day Saint declare, "We've done so much for Nauvoo. We should be able to put our visitor center wherever we want." City officials didn't have the money to fight it, she said, so the city council just voted for it. Alexander Speed, a Latter-day Saint who has lived in the historic city for about 3 years, says he doesn't think the church officials understand how the latest dispute looks to the people of Nauvoo. To at least a portion of the town, the site of the visitor center will remind them that the church does what it wants and you can't really trust what they say, is what I'm thinking it says here.
What the leaders say. Yep.
The leaders say. And again, we heard this from the mayor, Mayor Lesnar of Fairview, in his wonderful speech. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that, we have it on our site. Multiple people have clipped it, but he said the same thing. You don't think that once it's built, there won't be thousands of people that walk past it or drive past it and feel only animosity, remembering how the town was treated? That's exactly the legacy that's going to be there. That's not going to go away. So the city council voted, and in mid-July, the ground was broken. These are some gorgeous pictures. I don't think you can take a bad picture in Nauvoo. These were just taken from a friend of ours. And she just went out one day at lunchtime and snapped these just beautiful. I mean, aren't these so pretty, Landon? I don't think you can take a bad picture.
It's a gorgeous place. Yeah.
I know, it really is. And there's a couple different write-ups about the ground being broken. Here's one from, I believe, an evangelical group in the next slide. Yeah, Nauvoo Christian Visitor Center, where they say ground was broken this past week on the controversial new 24,000 square foot temple visitor center. It will sit directly in front of the Catholic Church, but will feature dramatic views of the Nauvoo temple at one end. And that was one of their points. They want people to go into the visitor center, be able to learn about the temple, and then look at the temple through the one end and see the what window, Landon?
The Tiffany stained glass window.
Tiffany stained glass window. That's right. While they're taking the sacrament in their
Which
house
probably
of worship.
costs more than the annual budget of the town.
Yeah, there you go. Because Jesus shops Tiffany. If there's any takeaway from this podcast, that's it. The
It's
design
not
of the new,
breakfast at Tiffany's, it's the Last Supper at
it's
Tiffany's.
the Last Supper at Tiffany's. That's it. Ooh, don't make fun of the Last Supper, Landon. You're going to
No,
get in trouble.
I should have learned
Unless
from the
you're talking
Olympics.
about Dionysus, then you're going to be okay. Okay. The design, let me finish reading that. The design of the new center will be classical, similar to the nearby temple arrival center building, and Nauvoo continues to evolve. So sounds like people are accepting it's happened. You can see big machinery's moved in there. There's some kind of big machinery, Landon. What are we seeing here?
I don't know what that is. Some sort of earth mover. So
An earth mover, yeah, a scooper. Yep. Also of interest, porta potties have moved in right there. All kinds of equipment and porta potties right in front of the temple. And as Landon pointed out, the Nauvoo temple is on a hill. So what is that giant ball right there, Landon?
that would be the town water tower that every town needs to have in the Midwest. It says Nauvoo on it. Of course, we heard a lot about the water towers in Fairview and how everyone had to just learn to live with looking at them when they could look at the temple. I have a feeling that the reason it was so important for them to put the visitor center there was they wanted to block the view of the water tower.
Yeah, because this is not a short water tower. This is the view from the hill. This is a full-size water tower.
Down the hill. Yeah.
So if you go to the next slide, I really think you're right. This is why they did it right there. They want to block that view. The visitor center will block that so people won't go, what's that weird ball over there by the temple? I think that's one of the main reasons. And you're right. In Fairview, they kept arguing, your town needs a water tower and it's tall. Why not a temple, which is equally as life-saving as water?
There you have it. And I think, but then they said, just as we have to look at the water tower, everyone should have to look at the temple.
Yeah, no, a water tower is a beloved, iconic part of the landscape in every small town in America. And it's absolutely necessary to pump the water into the towns from a height, as is an electrical tower, which they compared the temple to. So yeah, those have
evidently when you have $250 billion, you don't have to look at water towers. You build buildings to block the water towers.
I think we have one final slide. Let's see. Oh, no, two final slides. Okay, so here are pictures of all the temples that we've been talking about a lot in the last 18 months. Can you name them, Landon, in order? Can you name what they are?
That's McKinney on the left.
Yeah.
Let's see, that's Lone Peak, I think.
Lone Mountain, yeah.
Lone Mountain. They left the mountain out.
Yeah.
That will be in the background.
Yeah, because they're going to block it. That's why they left it out.
Yeah, the one on the bottom left is Heber.
Yeah.
Let's see, I think, is Cody the one on the right top?
I know Cody and Bakersfield are really similar,
And
so I can't remember which one
Bakersfield
has
is the one
more of the
down
dome.
below, and then the visitor center is the one in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. So, final thoughts and takeaways. I think this example of the visitor center is exactly what we've seen in all the other towns. The playbook is there. It's used in different ways depending on the makeup of the town. In this case, maybe it was a lot more like Heber. There were more LDS residents, but unlike Heber, these LDS residents kind of stood up and said, I'm more civic minded. Let's think about our town. In the end, it didn't matter, but it is kind of interesting to see that you can have an opinion that has more to do with your relationship in the community and the town. And you can say to your church, I love the temple. I want to go to the temple. I want there to be a temple, but can't we try to fit in and have good community relations and not destroy things here in our town?
Yeah, one of the things that really bothered me, and I don't think we showed it here, was the area authority when he at one point he was talking and he said, they said, you've threatened us with this RLUIPA, this letter you sent us. And he's like, oh, that was a mistake. That really shouldn't have been in there.
Yeah.
that letter has been sent to every community that one of these have been built in. That was not a mistake. That was not a misunderstanding. That was an intentional threat, a legal threat to every one of these cities. And that is how the church starts out. Every one of these buildings is by sending these letters out to the community officials, threatening that they will sue you if you do not allow them to build these temples, rather than working with the community. They stand there and say, we want to work so closely with you. We just don't want to listen to you. We don't want your input. And we just want you to agree to what we say. That seems to be the takeaway, or we're going to sue you. Again, this is not religious bigotry. If there is anything that's bigoted, it is the church against everyone who is not LDS.
Yep.
If you're not LDS, you're called the opposition. You're called opposed to the church when all you're doing is opposing a building. You're called the adversary. They have fasts against you. They call you mean-spirited when you say that you don't, that you oppose it. You are made out to be an evildoer because you simply say, this doesn't fit our zoning codes. And then they take this high ground that we have every legal right to treat you this way because it's our property and it's our property rights. And that trumps everything else, including being a good neighbor.
Yeah, I feel eventually this has to work its way through the court system, because this just can't stand like this, and it's such a loophole. It's such a battering ram that they can use over and over again. And they know it. They absolutely know it. Like we heard on the recording of the Curtin McConkie lawyer who said, I deal with other properties trying to get those built. I wish I had RLUIPA, meaning that's just a get out of jail free card. I can just hand over, RLUIPA, we're going to get you. And think back to our episode with Jason Palmer about the Peru temple, where he talked to somebody from the temple building committee, has the whole transcript. And that person said, oh, it's so easy in the States. We just go into residential areas. It's so easy to overturn their codes, with RLUIPA, right? And he was making the point it's harder internationally. So this is by design. This is not an accident. This is a playbook.
Well, the guy during the meeting said, we live and die by these codes. We follow codes. We live by the codes. So you know what they are then. You know that codes are important. Then why are you building them? You're intentionally going and breaking them on purpose and then making this RLUIPA argument rather than just saying, how can we conform with the codes of the neighborhoods we're going into so that we're not a bad neighbor? But they don't seem to care.
Point on social media, and it was a faithful person, these negative feelings. 20 years from now, no one will know. The temple's going to last forever. So I think they have this empire building mindset. I think Nelson's presidency has an empire building mindset. Hinckley, although he did build larger temples, you never heard really about these kinds of suits. I mean, there were definitely some things, but not like this. And it wasn't empire building. So this idea that, just pesky bad feelings, you guys will be gone soon. This continues on into the millennium, right? And that's a terrible attitude, because what you're trying to do is reach out to communities. You are supposed to be a good neighbor. Your missionaries come into these communities. You need to try to get along, but that's not happening because you don't have to get along. And I think you made a really good point yesterday. We were on Nemo. That was really fun, talking about the Birmingham temple. If you haven't caught that, check that out. But you said, the mark of a good neighbor is when you do something you're not compelled to do. You do it even when you don't have to, you still do it, right? And in this case, they don't have to. They have the money, they have the workaround, they have the lawyers. They don't have to, but they should for all these other reasons.
And for a religion that I grew up in, that's motto was choose the right. They sure make a lot of arguments about what their rights are and not what is right.
Yep. Very well said. Let's go to our final slide. I think we finally made it through. And here it is. How many times have we heard the words, we just want to be good neighbors? And it's usually like this. We just want to be good neighbors. That's not what they're saying, right, Mr. Rogers? No, it's not. Mr. Rogers taught us how to be a good neighbor. That's to play nice, care about others more than yourself, right? Share, be aware of others' feelings, all these things. And that's how you be a good neighbor. And none of that is happening in any of these towns. but I think it can. And I think the members themselves wish that it would. That's what I feel like. I feel the members are being manipulated and used on the ground by the institution. And I think the members are wonderful. I know they are. I mean, we're members, right?
You know who else taught about being good neighbors?
Wait, let me think. Is it somebody I would know? Is it?
It would be a religious figure, yes. That somehow has his name in this organization.
It sounds familiar.
That doesn't seem to follow any of those. So
yeah, somebody said WWJS. Who would Jesus sue? And I feel like that's what this has become. And I would think that any member, and I know there are a lot of members that are saying, this is not how we should act. This is not how we should be. I don't want to do this to my neighbors. I can have a temple and I can keep my community relations too. So I say, stop petitioning the cities, start petitioning the church as a member and just say, can't we just please work with these towns so that we can have good relations in our communities and a temple? There's a win-win for everyone.
that is the win-win.
That is the win-win. I know. Well, I think we covered it. Yet another temple. Like, this is a visitor center episode, and I'm sure there'll be more to come, right?
I'm sure there's more to come. Yep.
We're a one-trick pony just because the church seems to be a one-trick pony in this particular scenario. Isn't that right?
That's correct. So
well, everybody, please comment. Let us know. Were you aware of the Nauvoo Visitor Center or any of this craziness? This was just such a unusual story to us, and we really appreciate everyone from Nauvoo that reached out and talked to us and told us the story and how they felt, because it's an important story and we'll still be watching it for sure. And I'm glad we were able to record it. Please like and subscribe to Mormonish Podcast. If you would like to be made aware of when new episodes come out, you can hit the notification bell. If you would like to help financially support Mormonish Podcast, we have links in the show notes to Donor Box. We are a 501(c)(3), and I can tell you every day, like, we'll get a little note, so-and-so donated, a few dollars here and there. It just makes us so happy. It makes us feel like what we're doing makes a difference, and that we're appreciated and people want to help in the smallest way. We absolutely love just all of you. It means so much to us that you're thinking of us. So thank you so much, everybody who does donate, and especially sets up those monthly donations. That just means so much to us. So thank you. We also have our fun merch store with Mormonish merch. That's so hard to say. I can't wrap my Mormonish merchandise. Yeah, if you'd like that, we have a link in the show notes, and we'll say goodbye again with another episode under our belt. Right, Landon?
that's right. Good night.
That's it. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mormonish. We really appreciate our listeners and would love to hear from you if you have a story you'd like to share. You can email us at mormonishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, mormonishpodcast.org. And don't forget to look for us on YouTube and like and subscribe. Keep joyful, everybody.